we were talking about pop. Oh wait, no, there'd be no one here.
Good evening. We'll open the planning board meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, we have a busy schedule. Roll call. Mr. Prokofiev has stepped down. Mr. Chenis is absent. Public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that has public comment not related to an agenda item? Oh. Seeing none, I will back up where I should have started. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over Lunenburg Public Access. No public comment. We'll move right into the A&R for 205 Sunset Lane.
May I move the legs over?
Sure. You could take the microphone with you, either way.
Good evening, I'm Neil Gorman from David E. Ross Associates, Inc., representing the property owner Salvatore Vito Piccirillo Revocable Living Trust. The plan here that I'm showing you is a plan that was signed by the planning board in 2015, in which the land owned by the trust was broken into Lot 1 and Lot 2. We are here tonight proposing to divide Lot 2 into Lot 2A and 2B. Lot 2A is 3.12 acres of land with 107.85 feet of frontage. And Lot 2B has 1.84 acres of land and 749.66 feet of frontage. So the land is, or the plan is showing that the division has frontage and it has access. It's on the corner of Sunset Lane and Robs Hill Road.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have a question regarding the actual access
Yes.
to the sites. Can you go over that, please?
Do you,
Proposed house roughly for Lot 2B is up in this area, and the proposed house location for Lot 2A would be there. Is it possible to get off of Sunset Lane onto the property of Lot 2A? Yes. There isn't a guardrail, there is not any ledge outcrops or wetlands. We could certainly get off of Sunset Lane onto Lot 2A.
Is that your proposal?
We have not finalized all designs, but at this point, this is to meet the requirements of an A&R. This is what's being proposed.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm reading a letter from our land use director, and perhaps if Mr. Burney could
From
go
your
over.
building commissioner.
I'm sorry, from the building commissioner.
So I can touch on that a little bit. As the plan shows proposed, if the driveway were to come from Robs Hill Road, the building commissioner may not deem that to meet zoning and may require further approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals for relief from the definition of frontage. Frontage requires access through that strip of land. That strip of land at the southern portion of 2B is not owned or is not a portion of the lot for 2A. They can create the lot. They do show road frontage. They do show lot size. An A&R does not constitute buildability. It just allows them to administratively divide land, and we specifically put language on plans that says this does not classify this as a buildable lot for zoning purposes. The review we do and the letter from the building commissioner is informative to give them the opportunity to make amendments if they felt that it were necessary for them to do so in order to meet zoning or to do something different with the lot to meet the requirements that they do. This can be legally divided, it's not landlocked. The grades do present a challenge for putting a driveway in, but that doesn't preclude them from potentially designing a solution that would allow that frontage to gain access to the lot.
Okay, I don't see the applicant CC'd on this letter, nor do I see the engineer CC'd. Have they received a copy?
We did forward a copy to the
Okay.
engineer.
Yeah,
Okay.
we did receive it. I have a
Okay.
copy here. Thank you.
Okay.
Generally, what happens is the comments are benign, but when we do come up with something to that level, we do forward it to the surveyor who submitted the plan so they can inform their clients or provide additional documentation.
Okay, and has the comments from the Board of Health also been forwarded?
I did not receive
No, I
any.
don't believe we did.
Okay, just for your information, from a planning board standpoint, as Mr. Bernie stated, it's fine under our A&R procedure. However, I just want you to be aware of comments from Jim Gariffi. In order for these lots to be considered buildable from the Board of Health's perspective, the applicant will need to obtain an approved sewage disposal system and potable water supply with adequate well capacity for each lot.
Correct. We've done soil testing on both lots. It's all sand and gravel.
Okay.
So, thank you.
So that seems fairly clear, I guess. I mean, they're going to need to seek relief from zoning board
Or
to-
put in a
That would
very
be up
steep
to them to
driveway.
design, whether they feel that they can install a driveway that meets the requirements of section 256-4 of the code, or seek relief from the zoning board for a variance for the access through a non-frontage
So-
easement.
It's not even, I mean, there's no suggestion or mention of a shared driveway. Now, our shared driveway requires it to be on the lot line, doesn't it?
It does. There is a provision that would allow the planning board and the building commissioner independently to approve an alternative location based on a burden of proof to the applicant that it was safer, more adequate, something to that effect. And we've had instances where there was an existing driveway that was wholly on a newly created lot, and the board and the building commissioner agreed that permitting a second lot to branch off of that driveway made sense for a variety of reasons. The not needing to put a second driveway within a close proximity, the existence of that driveway already being there was reasonable and added to something that made the situation safer or prevented an environmentally sensitive area from being impacted, things like that.
My concern with this plan is that it shows driveway and utility easement for the benefit of Lot 2A on the A&R plan. And I have a problem with that language, because that language does not conform with our requirements. So I'm not comfortable signing this plan with that language on it.
It does seem a little precarious.
So I'm not comfortable signing it. And if the applicant wants to take that language off and present the plan as two standalone lots under the A&R, but given the fact that the wording on the plan is that it is presupposed that, and if we put our signatures on it, it's implied that we approve that language, and I do not. So until such time as that language is removed from the plan, I'm not comfortable signing it,
Or they get relief from,
prior to the signing of the plan.
so those are the two options.
Well, in
to
that case,
satisfy-
then the board would either need to deny the plan, because between now and the next meeting, there wouldn't be an opportunity for them to file and gain relief. And the 21-day clock starts now. This is the official filing of the A&R by them presenting it to the board.
Okay.
So you have 21 days to take action.
Okay, so
That
I
action
would,
is either to sign the plan or to deny the plan with a reason.
okay, I would make a motion to deny the plan based...
Well,
Okay,
before you make
Okay.
that motion,
okay,
you could ask the applicant's representative if they would be willing to remove that
Okay,
and have it signed at the next meeting, or if they would prefer to seek relief prior to the signature, and then you could move forward with your,
how would you like to proceed?
I will consult with the applicant. They may be fine with removing that language of the driveway easement, so.
Okay.
and we could continue it on to the next meeting. You
And
could-
that's within our time clock?
Correct. That would be within 14 days.
Okay.
Because today is the 11th, your next meeting is the 25th.
I will consult with them and
Okay, so I would make a
bring that-
motion to continue this A&R to our next meeting.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
thanks for your input and your time. Thank you.
So our next item is a public hearing continuation for 151181 Leominster Shirley Road. And we need to,
909 Mass Ave waiver is the next.
and they have requested a continuance, right?
Yes, they have.
Okay, so that puts 190 Electric Avenue.
No.
The continuance is until,
909, I'm sorry.
if we're continuing this and it's a public hearing, don't we have to continue it to a date specific?
And you'll need to vote on it.
Okay.
We skipped over an agenda item number 4.
Oh, okay.
Apologize. So our next item is 909 Mass Ave, waiver request. Good evening.
My name's John Ciprianos. I had sent a brief letter requesting a waiver from change of use for a property my wife and I bought a few months back, 909 Mass Ave, commonly referred to as the Harley House. Previous tenants there for about 4 years had a consignment shop, so a retail business. They took up at least 4,500 square feet of the building. Previous to that was a bed and breakfast and a restaurant, which took up 6,500. We're just seeking to put a professional office for our real estate business, about 1,200 square feet. Parking was established from the restaurant. I mean, it's quite honestly ridiculous. They've got parking lot lights out there and whatnot, you know. So we're just a small business that wants to operate from our primary residence.
Excellent. Let me just say that I'm glad folks have purchased that property and decided to keep it that way.
Oh, we're so excited, I'll tell you.
excellent.
Really. When we came across it, it was like, oh, I could see all the work that had been put into it at one point. And looking forward to seeing it in the spring, as far as the gardens and whatnot, you know. Try to get it back in shape, too.
Excellent.
It's been a little neglected.
So they're your primary residence?
Yeah, we live there now, December 6th.
It would be a mixed use in the Village District. It's a permitted use. So they are here tonight seeking relief from the site plan approval requirements for change of use because they're going from retail to professional office as the commercial portion of the mixed use. Building inspector has identified it as a by right use, has said there's no zoning relief necessary, but he does deem it a change of use. So what the planning board is being asked is to review the physical site, which in my conversation with the new owner is not going to be altered on the exterior or on the site other than what one would expect for normal maintenance for landscaping and upkeep and potentially a resurfacing at some time in the future, but no building expansion, no parking expansion, those sorts of things. And you're essentially performing your site plan function without the necessity for a public hearing due to the reoccupation of an existing building and the unchanging nature of the parking facilities and exterior site.
Mr. Chairman? According to the packet we received, and first I want to congratulate you and welcome you to Lunenburg.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to see the house have those repairs. Based on the packet that you submitted, you show that your office is going to be in the bricked-in portion, which leads to the exterior backyard.
Yeah, more or
That's-
less, right. Where the the windows are kind of in the middle of technically it's the side of the house, but about halfway down.
Are you also going to be utilizing that area to the right, the large add-on area?
Where those 4 windows are,
Yeah.
there's a picture of that room with the fireplace in it, and then the long, narrow room,
Okay,
because even though it's a small business, in case we want to, have a conference table, that kind of thing,
Okay.
kind of get it out of the way.
okay.
Because really, that main room's going to be set up more, yes, there's going to be a desk or two, but that's going to be set up more as just a nice room to sit, more than, trying to build some office with 20 associates and just
Okay.
a retail-looking office environment. It's not going to be that at all. I want to utilize the property for, our home, but take advantage of the beauty of the property instead of trying to turn it into something that it's not. I think
Right.
I could have never made it what it is.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my feeling, so I want to work off of that if it makes sense.
Okay. I just have a question on how we do this. If we grant the waiver, it's obviously based on the information that's in the packet. Do we grant it with stipulations about square footage or about the use, or how does that work?
You certainly can. You can say you're granting it for waiver of use as a professional office to be maintained in these 2 portions of the building, not to exceed. You have those rights. I mean, the property owner is in front of you explaining what he wants. He's been clear about keeping it small, and maybe you have a conversation with him about what he thinks is the maximum number of brokers he may wish to have, or the number of desks, and
I guess that's
you
what-
kind of you kind of can get that sense from him and say, listen, we're willing to go to this level, and we're willing to grant you the waiver for that. Once you grow beyond this number, maybe we have to revisit this conversation, and that's certainly something that can.
And that's, I guess, where I'm going, is
Yeah.
I have no problem with the use as proposed, but if the business grows and continues to expand, which I hope that it does, I want to understand that we're waiving the site plan review. I want to understand that that's because of the information that's in this packet. And my concern is you're proposing approximately 1,200 square feet, and I want to really make sure that's going to be adequate for you
Fine.
as you go forward.
Yeah, no problem. If you want to, use that as a stipulation, I don't want to I bought it primarily as a residence.
Okay.
But I was really looking for something for, to have my business in as well. But no, I used to have an office years ago in Concord Center. I already tried let's get 1 million brokers in, and quite honestly, it's not my interest.
I'm just wondering, because I'm very familiar with the property, and when you go in through that bricked area, the long, narrow room, as you
Right,
called it,
right.
and you go to the right, there's another building there. You're not proposing to use that?
That apparently, from what I heard, that was like a garage, and they finished it off to
Yeah.
finished heated living space, but they used it as a function room for
Right,
the
they had
restaurant.
seating, and I want to make sure you're not...
I'm
'cause-
just, I've got storage stuff in there.
Okay.
I mean, I
Do you
don't...
want to include that in your request in the event that it might make sense to include that, just because it's
If you don't mind,
contiguous?
I didn't want to seem greedy, but if you don't mind...
Personally, I don't mind. I'd prefer that you ask for what potentially you could use. So I'm just looking at the property. I know that that's contiguous with the remainder of the space that you're talking about.
Right.
And it makes sense to, in my mind, to include it.
Well, let's put it this way. I would be more than willing to accept the use of it. However, I wouldn't want it to hinder the waiver concerning anybody about that I'm going bigger that I'm saying. Because if we're including it, I'd be more shocked than anybody here that I'm ever going to use it for anything more than some storage and put some tools in it. I just don't want to live in the environment having people in and out all the time.
Right.
And like I say, I had an office in Concord Center, been there, done that. I want a small, quiet, professional atmosphere that I can do business. My clients appreciate the atmosphere more than just going into the high-pressure sales place.
Right. Personally, I wouldn't have a problem, and I'd prefer to have that included, just because in the event that the business does grow, we don't have to come back, but I don't know how the other members feel.
Sure. I'm wondering, do you currently have any employees?
No.
No. Do you intend on gaining any?
As far as sales associates from that side of the business, if I do, as my letter said, it's honestly going to be the exception of the rule. If I knew somebody personally that was really good at what they do and really ethical, sure, I'd let them hang their license. I'm not interested in anybody who gets a license, who thinks they want to sell real estate, who's more trouble than they're worth.
Okay. So in my mind, that doesn't qualify for anything more than a home business, right?
Right.
And I don't, I wouldn't see that there would be anything, I mean, even outside the Village Center District. I don't think we preclude any of the residential
No.
zones for home businesses. And what is that, maximum of two?
Two.
So maybe what I might stipulate is that we can waive that until he decides to have more than 2 employees and then come back for a site plan review.
That sounds great.
Well, excuse me, sir.
Sure.
If I just may add, I don't know, I understand your intention of 2 employees. Legally, just in case you're not aware, people who work in a real estate office aren't employees, they're subcontractors.
Okay.
So I think what you're saying is if there's more than 2 other bodies floating around, you want that, but...
I'm not entirely sure how the bylaw reads.
It does say employees. I think subcontractors can be construed. I think where this is a legal use in the village district, you're better off working with him to constrain it within a square footage area that he's comfortable with and you're comfortable with. And that way, you don't have to try and parse out home business versus mixed use. It's a mixed use, and that's what he's come in front of you for, and it would, I believe it would be in everybody's best interest to say this portion of the building is the business portion, the remainder shall be the residence, and, you know, if you expand the business beyond this point, it would require additional
Okay.
review.
Do you know what the square footage is of that other building that we talked about?
I haven't measured it, but off the top of my head, if I was gonna guess, that area is about, probably about 2,500 square feet. It's about 50 by 50,
Okay.
that large section in the
Okay.
back. And it is heated and,
So it would be 3,700 square feet.
right.
I don't have any issues with it as it's proposed. I understand the concern with, like, keeping the use to a certain point, but there are a lot of things that would trigger planning board review. I mean, the minute they go to do any paving work, that triggers planning board review. And so if the business does grow, which I hope it does, you're gonna have other things that would trigger planning board review anyhow. And so I don't see any need to put a cap on how many people. I mean,
No, I
so many layers to the bylaw already. And this use is far smaller than the previous uses. I mean, I don't know what the Harley House was rated for capacity, but it had to have been 100 people.
Oh,
at
yeah, I mean,
least,
it's got a
at least.
complete commercial fire system in the house, and, you know, it was done to commercial specs.
So,
So if the chairman allows, I would make a motion to approve the requested rate waiver for real estate sales management and contracting as requested, with the stipulation that the use does not exceed 4,000 square feet.
Sound good to you?
second.
Excellent. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Excellent.
so
Thank
much.
you and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So now we're getting into our public hearings.
your continuance.
So the first one has been asked for another continuance, so now we're at 190 Electric Ave, correct?
You need to vote on the continuance.
Date specific.
Had they requested a
They
date?
did request a date. It was May 13th.
Which is subsequent to town meeting?
Correct. It is the Monday after town meeting.
Okay.
Or,
I would
it's the
make,
first meeting after town meeting.
okay. I would make a motion to continue the public hearing for 151, 181 Leominster Shirley Road to May 13th
At
6:35.
at 6:35.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moved. After many false starts, 190 Electric Avenue, continuation. We need to reread the public hearing.
Ken, if you'd like, you don't have to.
We don't need to?
Just to be clear, I want to inform the board, I've informed the applicant, we only have 3 members this evening. This is a special permit, it requires a supermajority of 4 affirmative votes in order for the approval to pass. So any discussion tonight can happen. It is a legal meeting, the public hearing is open. You probably don't want them to vote tonight. And the missing member can file an affidavit under the Mullen Rule and can vote as long as he doesn't miss another meeting, which theoretically wouldn't happen.
Understood. Well, thank you for having us. Just as a recap, Brandon and I represent Borrego Solar. My name's Josh Farkas. We're the developer on the project and the eventual construction company for the proposed project. This is our second meeting here tonight, and as a recap, we presented to you all roughly 1 month ago where we initially presented the project, and we kind of worked through the project, and I would say there were 2 action items that needed to happen there. We needed to receive comments back from the peer reviewer, which we actually just received earlier today. They're probably in your packets, but we've just started reviewing those. Overall, on a detailed level, we're happy to jump into those, issue by issue if you'd like, but we feel confident that over the next couple of weeks we can work through those. So I thought maybe I would just jump right into the main item that we talked about a couple weeks ago, which was the effect of this project on the residents on Electric Avenue. So prior to our arrival for the first hearing, we had done a public notice to all abutters of the project. And we were asked, basically what we were asking was to clear within 100 feet of the eastern property line, or clear up to 100 feet. We weren't trying to have a variance or anything like that to the bylaw. We're still planning on placing our solar modules or panels at the 200-foot line, which is what the bylaw calls for. And we proposed some additional screening and essentially asked the board for relief to clear to the 100-foot mark. And we were given an assignment to basically reach out to those abutters on Electric Ave once more to make sure that they were aware and we had a chance to talk to them. So we've done just that. We've sent a second set of notified or certified mail out to them. There were seven properties in question. We received green cards of delivery back from 4. And just a couple hours ago, Brandon and I knocked on each of those 7 doors, with one more further to the north. And I thought I would just kind of give an overview of the results of that, if that works for you all.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, if possible, I was wondering if you could turn that so people in the audience could see as well.
So does that sound fair if I just kind of give a recap of the 8 doors that we knocked on, just to kind of start from there? Okay. So I'd say 1 would fit into the fully supportive class. 1 was here, Ralph, I don't remember Ralph's last name, but he was here last week. He spoke to support the project. 2 said that they don't have issues, didn't really want to talk about it, didn't necessarily say they were supportive or against it, they just said they didn't have issues. 1 was, I would say, curious, had a handful of questions. We went into the home and we talked through it. I would classify them as mostly supportive. We got 1 that my parents are not home, so we didn't make any progress there. 1 has questions and said that they'd be in attendance tonight to see the hearing. 1 signed for the second letter that we just delivered. They were not home, but they did sign for it. I can show you that on the green cards. Didn't have a chance to meet with them, just knocked on the door, no results. And then 1 other did not answer as we knocked. So from talking on the street and asking, who lives here, who lives there, I believe the one that did not answer, I think the home is rented out, or the owner of the home does not live there. But that, basically we got 1 who has some potential questions tonight, and other than that, it was mostly positive. I don't want to speak on behalf of anybody, but that was a recap of our knocking on doors.
Do we have a copy of the letter that you sent?
You do, we submitted it.
Okay, is that in the packet?
Yes, it is.
Yep, it was submitted in I don't know if it's in your packet, but it was submitted in our response to the peer reviewer after our last hearing.
So what are the requirements for the green cards?
There are no requirements, because we send out notice for public hearing. I think what Borrego did was they felt the best way to track that they had communicated with them was to send certified mail, return receipt requested. So they send it out, they pay the $7 or $8 to the post office, and it comes with that fancy green card, and someone signs it when they've received it or picked it up, and it goes back to Borrego to give proof that the letter arrived where it was sent.
So that was above and beyond the requirement?
Correct. That was in response to the
Thank you.
board's comments last meeting that they felt those 7 direct abutters should be made extra effort to identify if they had any concerns.
All right, so.
Mr. Chairman, I'm seeing, I thought you said there were 7 abutters. Am I incorrect, or did I misunderstand?
There are 7 abutters in this section of Electric Avenue. There's one additional further north.
Okay,
Avenue.
Just
Okay.
above the electric easement.
Okay.
We just figured we'd knock on that door as well.
Okay.
While we were kind of moving our way up.
okay.
And that was the gentleman, Ralph, who spoke in support
Yeah.
of the we didn't realize that was his home when we
Okay.
walked up there.
Okay. All right, I want to thank you for sending the letter. I just read it. It's very clear that what you're requesting and why you're requesting it. So I want to thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So, public hearing, mind if we hear from the public?
Absolutely.
Excellent. If there is anybody that has anything to say for or against this project, please step up. Nobody? Please. Hey, just state your name and address.
McAuliffe, Brian, it's my father Francis,
Welcome.
and 146 Electric Ave. So from what we understand, the bylaw is a 200-foot buffer strip where there isn't to be any trees cut, but they're asking to be able to cut trees in that area. That's correct? Do you know how many trees? You're gonna cut all of them, or from a certain height up?
Within this area, so if you see this, I believe this is your property zone. So this area, so this dashed line is 200 foot. So it's basically this section that is in question. And what we'll do in this area is we will have to cut all trees. We'll leave the stumps, but they will be removed.
So all,
I'm sorry, if you guys are gonna have.
Yeah, you gotta use the mic.
We need to have the microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, so in this light green area, all these trees will be removed, the stumps will remain. But if you note on, they're not shown on this plan, but we are proposing to replace basically these trees with 2 rows of evergreen plantings, and then we'll put, and then fence slats on this section of fence to help replace the screening qualities of those trees that were cut.
were there any trees in this area here that were gonna be cut?
Yes, well, in this light green basically is trees right now that are existing that will be
That's where
cut.
the panels are going, so obviously all those will be removed.
Correct.
Well, we're just concerned with the 200-foot buffer strip,
Yep. That's been the main issue of discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
because the elevation of our property,
Can you just pass him the microphone, please?
because of the elevation of our property, we'll be looking down onto it, so any 6-foot tree or 7-foot fence isn't gonna block any view at all. That's our concern.
And that is definitely a valid concern. One thing that we tried to do, what we're proposing to try and help with that, because it does slope down, is put the row of trees as close to the existing tree line as possible to get them up closer to higher, screen as much as possible. We are not proposing any along this section.
I mean, from here, you can pretty much see out probably 180 degrees.
Yeah, as of right now, the proposed issue is within this 200-foot buffer. That's where we were proposing the additional screening measures.
So basically, that's not going to help us out as far as whether we see the
Can we ask a question? Can we ask a question?
Well, this is public comment. The comments are really supposed to go from the podium to the board and then from the board to the presenter. I apologize for it just needs to be, I can't even hardly hear the questions.
Yeah, I can't hear.
Honestly.
So that we can all agree, all the trees will be cut in this strip here. And then some going down this way.
If you could just speak into the microphone, I'm really having a hard time hearing you.
So we're going to cut all the trees in this 200-foot buffer, this section here. And then going down this way, some of the trees, I guess my point is there's several trees back there that are probably over 100 feet tall. And so right now, it's pretty, all we see is woods. So obviously, we're concerned on the amount we're going to see. Is that 10 acres of solar panels? Is that what it is? So,
Yes, it's approximately 10 acres within the fenced area. And, yeah.
would you say that's about 15,000 panels, or?
It's actually approximately 6,000 solar panels, yeah. So, and I just want to mention a couple things. So this, within the tree clearing limit, we will need to clear all the trees, but we're not all the trees within the 200-foot buffer. It'll be basically just that 100-foot swath. Out this kind of easterly border is outside of the 200-foot buffer, so that's why we're not proposing additional screening, and because it does drop off.
Right. Okay, but again, due to the elevation of the property, by cutting the trees, we believe we're going to see a good amount of the solar panels versus basically what we see now.
I think what we would like to propose, since obviously you guys have concern about visual, we would like to propose to basically leave any trees uncut within 200 feet of their property. Basically to keep the bylaw, or match what the bylaw states, if that's acceptable to the board.
So
What does that do to the configuration of your panels?
So toward the property owners that we're discussing with right now, we took a look at this specifically after we had a chance to meet with you, sir. And we took a look, and actually your home, I would say let me just make sure I got the right one here. Yep. I would say the majority of the 200-foot buffer is being honored by your home. To the north, beyond your property line, not much is actually going to be within the, we're not proposing much clearing within the 200 feet to your specific property. The couple properties a little bit further north of you are, I would say, the more extreme measure of our proposal, where the screening would be actually off of your property, which is 146 Electric Ave. There's definitely room, and you're the first group we've heard of that's had some concern here. So for your property in particularly to the southern portion of the proposed additional screening, that would actually be a pretty easy area for us to leave some of the existing trees. If you look at anyone who's got the detail, you can see that actually most of the trees within the 200 feet are there. So we could do that with very few changes to the plans, actually, for your particular property.
we've actually been looking at the previously submitted sheet C 6.0, the three cross sections. And we were wondering if it's be possible for the next meeting that you create one of those from this property?
Yeah, we can definitely add a cross-section applicable to this property to that sheet. Yep.
I think in general, what that will do is give a bit more visual. I don't know if he has seen the cross-section, if you can show him what it would look like, and that way he would get an idea of what we're talking about. So it's, I know.
But I just want to make sure I understood. What I heard you just say is that you would push that back to meet the 200-foot buffer behind this property.
So sorry for all the back and forth over here. So there's quite a few properties. I think the best way will probably be for me to point. So the home we're discussing is this one here, correct, sir? Yeah. So this is the area right here where we're proposing the additional clearing. If you actually go out from the northern property line of, are we at 70? I'm sorry. The McAuliffe family, correct?
Right.
So if you, from the northern property line of McAuliffe, if you extend out into our property, just a small section of trees, if they were left, we could stay at 200 feet. I'm not saying that we eliminate all of this, but this is the first abutter we've heard from that has some questions, and I think that if we were to fill this section right here, it's just in case anyone,
Yeah, but
that section right there could keep a 200-foot buffer
Still gonna
off
see
of your property line.
I will just be, I don't know if this is appropriate, or do we do this later? But my concern is that, you know, I understand that you're looking at meeting that requirement for directly behind the property, but my concern is that when you look out from the back of your property, you don't look just in one area. So my concern is that immediately to the side of that tree line's going to be gone. So I'm not sure, from my perspective, that that's going to alleviate the concerns of the abutter. So I'd like perhaps you to address that.
Basically, now we have a view beyond here, over there. So now we're just talking a small area.
Okay.
So I guess bottom line is we'd prefer there wasn't any cutting in the 200-foot buffer.
Okay.
Honestly, we would prefer that too. Unfortunately, when the bylaw was written, it wasn't very clear. You know, you can,
Sounded cut and dry.
buffer is a very flexible word. Unfortunately, it wasn't specified as a vegetated buffer, existing naturally vegetated buffer, a visual buffer, an audible buffer. It just buffer, and it's a difficult term to nail down. And
Obviously.
oh, I don't disagree with you, sir, but it's just not written in our bylaw, so it's not something that we can say that it has to be 200.0 feet of untouched vegetation. We can't require it because the bylaw doesn't say that.
Have other projects in town?
It's very, almost every single solar project that we've had, it has come up.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would like the applicant to talk about, because to the side of the property that we're talking about is where you're proposing the utility components of the property. Can you talk about what they're visually going to look like?
Toward the access down here off of Electric Ave, right here.
No, I'm talking about to the, I'm going to find it now.
Oh, like what's
Inverter
actually
and the-
down there that they're looking at? Sure.
Yeah.
So looking down, you know, obviously we have the access road, which you'll pass through and have the turnaround area. To the northeast side of that road, there's basically, there's equipment pads of inverters, which converts the electricity from its direct current to its alternating current to send it back out to the street. Those are mounted on concrete equipment pads. And then there's an energy storage container, which I would best describe as basically a storage container, almost like a pod that would be filled with batteries, energy storage batteries that are all hooked up inside with, you know, you wouldn't see it, but full of computers and batteries, basically. That's the majority of what's there. It's inverters, transformers. Yep, transformers are one other piece of equipment. And then obviously on the far side of the road would be solar modules on a racking system. The high point of them would be about 8.5 feet on the highest edge, and then as it comes down, kind of like this board, it'd be about 3 feet on the front end. The panels will be facing to the south, so this group here would kind of be looking almost in between the rows, so the glare would not be pointing at them in that direction.
Saying there wouldn't be a concern for glare?
So these systems can be installed right next to airports. If you look at some of the smaller airports in Massachusetts, we've actually installed quite a few on the West Coast. At the San Diego airport is one of them. So in order to do that, you've got to go through all sorts of glare studies. I'm not a glare expert, but I do know that they can be installed on, surrounding, and within airports. So yes, there's some glare on them, but the level is an acceptable level, I guess would be the way to describe it. And just for anyone who's curious why we're proposing to clear at this 100-foot area here, just to reiterate that, the shade that comes from the south will cast up into this region here, and much of this section here would be basically in shade most of the day, and therefore be rather ineffective. So that's why we've opened this box, and that's why we're trying to provide some additional screening in this area, because we understand what your point of view, and part of this is a little bit of a exploratory process with, going out on the site and talking to the folks that live there and trying to accommodate it. So I wasn't trying to do a small offering here, but as from your home as you look north, I'd say, I don't know, maybe 25% of the system is up in that direction. Down in this area, we're following the rules of the town and feel like that would be adequately screened. So we're definitely on board with that viewpoint, trying to fix that for you.
Again, I don't think, because of the elevation, any screening is going to help from I was thinking it was about 30 feet above.
Can I ask a procedural question? Since I'm new to this whole process, does the planning board ever do site visits?
They have the right to.
Okay. Personally, I'd like to visually see the site. Seeing a site is very different than looking at a drawing.
Correct.
So personally, I'd like to arrange for us to actually visit the site and look at it from the different perspectives of the abutter.
So there's a couple of ways that we could do that. Historically, the board has done so individually at their leisure. The applicants, when they submit an application, sign a right of entry form. So you have the right to access 190 Electric for town business as part of reviewing this application. If you wanted to set up a site visit when the entire board went, we could certainly try and figure out a time that would work. If you wanted to speak to Mr. McAuliffe, you might be able to set up a time that you could visit with him and see his perspective and what his concerns are. We don't have the right to enter abutters properties. So, there's a few different ways that could be handled.
I know I've attended some site walks by conservation, and I know deliberation can't occur.
Correct.
However, there have been site walks, for example, when we talked about the cutting plan, that the abutters were notified of that site visit and had an opportunity to talk to the forester. And I'm wondering if we could set something like that up, knowing that the planning board can't deliberate, but that way...
You can gather information, you just can't deliberate about the project. So, I mean, the abutters could be given the opportunity to speak. It's not a public meeting per se. It's not accessible, all those things, but we could certainly work with the folks from Borrego to try and set something like that up if that's something the board would be interested in.
Just to mention, there is a site walk scheduled for this Saturday with the Conservation Commission, who we'll be seeing next week. So, if anyone would be interested, I know that's short notice.
What time is that?
I believe it's in the morning. We might have to get back to you on the time, but we do have a scheduled visit that we can make happen for you. I don't know offhand, I'm sorry.
Okay.
You may have a hard time getting the abutters together and
Right, right.
I mean, Mr. McAuliffe is here tonight. He seems to be the one who has the concerns that he's bringing forward. So if he wanted to allow people into his backyard to see what he's seeing, he may be able to agree to that tonight.
Would you be willing to allow that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would it be possible also to maybe point out which trees are going to be cut down, especially the ones that are 100 feet high or whatever?
That's one of the questions I would have, is I would want to know, looking at the site the way that it is now, and then proposed, the tree line that you're proposing to cut from, I'd like to understand that visually.
Sure. So at times, we'll basically bring a really long tape measure and kind of eyeball it together as a group on the spot, like, you show me where your property line is, and we mark out 100 feet, and then we know it's heading north, so we can create a pretty good idea of where it is. I know we can't deliberate over it, but we'll have to communicate a little bit just to get that done, but we could make that happen.
So we can post a meeting for that Saturday?
No need to post.
No?
Because
We don't need
it's
to
not a
post?
meeting, it's a site walk. You're just
Okay.
gathering information, you're not
Okay.
deliberating.
Okay.
If you'd like me to post that it's a site walk, I can certainly do that, but
Well, if we're not required to, I guess we don't, I thought it was a requirement.
I'll double check, but I don't believe site walks are required to be posted.
Okay.
I would also ask, just from I don't own the land. I can talk to our landowner, but just from that perspective, I don't know if the appropriate move would be to have an open invitation versus just the planning board or just the direct abutters on Electric Ave. I think we should just maybe control that a little bit, so I can run that by our landowner. I know that the board absolutely has the right to, so I'm very open to it. I just want to make sure we don't jump the gun and...
Sure, if it's not
Yeah.
a posted meeting, then it would only be conservation and planning,
Right.
right?
Okay.
And if it's possible, I think I'm going to attend the site walk on Saturday, but is identifying that tree line something you could potentially do for Saturday? Or is that too short notice?
Yeah, I think we have some snow falling tomorrow or the day after,
I know,
right?
that's why I'm asking.
I think I could do a pretty good indicative job of where the property lines are. I won't be able to get a survey crew or anything
No,
out there
I know
by
that.
Saturday, of
I
course.
know that.
But we could put something together for sure.
Okay.
Very good. Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Saturday, right. I don't know the time because I think we're going to kind of try to join the conservation so that the applicant isn't doing two.
Did you sign in for the public hearing? If you would, and if you'd leave an email address, when we confirm about what time and all of that, I'll get in touch with you.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to have anything to say about this? Please.
Phyllis Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. In listening to this, I feel that neighbors should not have to feel that they are in the enforcers of the town's bylaws. It feels like time and time again, anything goes unless a neighbor complains. I don't think that's a fair position to put the neighbors in. If the town has bylaws, they should just adhere to the bylaws unless there's some really serious reason not to abide by the bylaws. If the bylaws are flawed, then what's the plan for remedying that? Is there something on the town meeting warrant for this May to address that issue?
There's quite a bit on the warrant, but nothing to address the solar issue.
Well, don't you think it's timely? I mean, there are many communities that are getting very unattractive because of the impact of solar farms.
I don't disagree, but we have tried to enforce this, and we've been sued.
So then don't you think that that it's imperative to address the bylaw flaw now?
I would, Mr. Chairman, if I can just comment, I was going to actually bring that up as well. Looking at the language, it does talk about unless the applicant can demonstrate and the planning board finds that adequate buffering can be provided in a narrow, Solar project shall be surrounded by a buffer strip which shall be 200 feet in depth unless the applicant can demonstrate and the planning board finds that adequate buffering can be provided in a narrow buffer strip. If I understand what you said, the issue is it doesn't say vegetated buffer, it doesn't say existing natural buffer. It doesn't seem to me that putting the words, the existing, a vegetated buffer, or, I mean, isn't that a minor change that we could accomplish at town meeting?
I believe so.
Although I understand that there are other issues with the solar bylaw, but this seems to be the big issue. So I would recommend that we submit an article to address this and make it a vegetated buffer, and specify what that vegetation has to be. A vegetated buffer adequate to, screen the sight line 200 feet from the neighbors, or however we have to fix this, but we need to fix it.
I would fully support that, and I
Thank
would
you.
fully support it being a 200-foot naturally existing buffer. But I'm not quite sure.
You still,
So Graves Engineering is up.
Good evening, everybody. For the record, I'm Jeff Walsh with Graves Engineering, your engineer. I'd like to point out there is also a definition of buffer strip in the zoning bylaw that it is in section 250-4.15, section B, first definition, buffer strip. It just kind of helps head it in the direction that you're headed in. I don't know if it answers all the questions, but anyways, let me read it for the audience. A strip of land between the solar voltaic arrays and any structures accessory thereto in the boundary of the parcel, reserved for plant material, berms, walls, or fencing to serve as a visual buffer. Now, when I reviewed the plans, I looked at that, but I also looked at the use of the buffer strip that speaks to the 200 feet unless demonstrated otherwise by the applicant and agreed. My take on it, it calls for 200 feet. It allows the board some latitude, and I think that's been the trouble over the few projects we've looked at is the latitude. And no one knows how it's going to play out until somebody like this, a board makes a decision in this challenge in court and see how it holds up in court. Other than that, we try to define it. You can try to continue to define it, but I don't know if it's going to be overly successful. It may or may not, depends on how tight it's written. But I wanted the board to know, the important thing is when I looked at that other section about 200 feet and so forth, I referred also back to the buffer section. I don't know if it helps you or makes things more confusing, but.
No, I appreciate you pointing
and I
that
think
out.
historically what has been discussed is that definition along with the other language, even adding vegetated doesn't with the ability for the planning board to alter it, combined with some of the other larger issues associated with the solar bylaw was why the board didn't just add a word. There was a thought that upon closing out marijuana, solar would be the next bylaw to be addressed going forward to fall town meeting with work happening, as we wrap up public hearings for marijuana and into the summer and whatnot with.
I completely understand that, that there's a lot on the plate, but I also think we have a number of projects coming for us. This has been an issue for a great deal of time, and I think it needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. I understand the concern about how do we address it, because I think that does make it a little bit more muddy, but the reality is, now that you've pointed out the definition, you talk about a visual barrier. Well, the reality is that right now there are hundreds or I don't know how many trees that provide a 100-foot screen. You're removing those screens and replacing them with a fence, a lattice fence. So to me, that's not the same visual barrier. So if we're going to look at the definition of buffer strip, I would look for the project to maintain the visual buffer that it has currently.
I think you need to be real careful with that analysis, though.
Okay, why?
Okay, I'm gonna put a solar farm in a hayfield. I'll leave 200 feet of grass. That doesn't provide the buffer that this project's providing.
That's
Yet
true.
it's 200 feet of vegetation,
That's true.
existing vegetation.
That's true.
And I want to apologize. After so many times of not being able to enforce what we did have, I completely forgot that it does say a visual barrier. So in our definition of buffer strip, it says visual barrier.
So
And we really haven't been able to enforce it.
the real issue as it relates to this project is, do you allow the applicant to remove 100 feet of existing and replace it with fencing and smaller trees?
And I think that's why looking at the site is so important, because when you talk about a visual barrier, I don't know the elevations of this property or what the view is from this individual's property. So understanding whether or not the visual barrier that's being provided is going to be adequate is going to be what's going to be the determining factor. So that's why I think it's important we actually look at it.
I think the bylaw works for it. It's just uncomfortable because you have to interpret each site and
Right, because
make
it's
some
site-specific.
decisions.
It's site-specific.
Absolutely, I wanted to bring up that point. If you're looking up a hill into a project, a fence or something shorter might be appropriate, whereas in another project where you're looking down into the project, elevation and the tree canopy up high might be more critical than the lower elevation. So if you tighten up regulations too tight, you may not get
Achieve what you're looking for.
the intent of the bylaw.
Yep.
So, to that point, this site, I have visited the site, the residences along Electric Avenue do look down onto the project. The project's, the land drops from Electric Ave. It's, drops somewhat through the lots and then drops even much more so once you get onto the site. Historically, the site has been cleared to some extent of trees. There still are trees remaining, but you can see the logging operations have taken place. My recommendation would be park over in the church parking lot and walk in. That's what I did, and I found it very easy to get around the site carrying the existing and proposed conditions plan.
Okay.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, well, we'll finish this and then I'll ask my questions.
Okay.
Okay. So, any more public comment? Seeing none?
Can I make just one more comment before we finish
course.
up? So, anyone in the audience are maybe wondering why, why go through this, Borrego, to discuss, this very key piece? Because obviously it's a difficult topic. One of the key reasons we felt like it was worth going for this is based on the elevations and how, as you go out the back of the properties on Electric Ave, there's quite a bit of space, and there's about a 30-foot difference. So if you're 5 or 6 feet tall and you're looking down at a panel that's on a rack that's 6 or 7 or 8 feet tall, your eyesight's at about 35, 36 feet, and that's going to be down 25 to 30 feet lower, depending on exactly where you're standing. And there are 100 foot of trees out in front of you. So it's not like, and believe me, I've seen projects where right at the property line, it dips right down. It is a little bit more gradual, and the panels are still 200 feet. So I think a site walk will be very valuable, and our opinion was that based on the topography and the trees and 100 feet and this, adding slats to the fence and planting, we thought that we could do a good job to meet the spirit of the bylaw, which was to provide a visual buffer to the project, or a visual barrier, I think it is. So we're totally on board with that. We want to be super responsible and respectful to the abutters, so we're definitely open for that. I just wanted to drop that in so we didn't look like we're missing, missing that part of the bylaw. We definitely understand it.
All right, very good.
So this will need to be continued.
Now, is there a difference between asking for continuance versus just continuing in general? I mean,
No, you'll need to continue to a date certain.
so, I mean, how's our time clock?
There is no time clock.
There's no time clock.
Town
Okay,
meeting was
very good.
gracious, yes.
Okay.
So I guess the question I would pose to the board, or through the board to the applicant, is what is their time frame for being able to turn around the comments on Mr. Walsh's letter? The creation of the section that the sightline section that they've agreed to put together, as well as this is your first meeting with conservation this coming week. So that potentially could have some impacts on the design or what you're doing. So functionally, what's a date that you would reasonably want to continue to?
We'd love to come back in 2 weeks. We find that the most work we can get done is actually by coming here and meeting with you all. A month ago, we hadn't spoken to any abutters. Today we have, and who knows who else we might have a chance to speak to. But I feel like coming back is the most effective way for us to keep that going.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
So you need a motion.
I would make a motion to continue the public hearing to February 25th. At what time, Adam?
6:35 is,
At
we set them all.
6:35.
25th?
Second.
Oh, sorry.
Excellent. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just before we go on, can I just, given the points that Mr. Cole made and Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Pointing out the definition within the bylaw, I'm not sure that the bylaw is broken. I think that it is unfortunately site-specific, as Mr. Chan pointed out. So I think it truly puts the planning board in a judgment call situation, but I don't know how you can avoid that.
I think the only other option is to restructure the entire bylaw, which I think is what the board has talked about, and includes things like looking at what is small scale, what is large scale.
Okay.
Can solar be a primary use in certain areas? Should it be a primary use in certain areas? What does it look like as a primary use or a secondary use?
So it's a much bigger issue, but the issue of the buffer is addressed in that it talks about being a visual barrier.
And I think that the issue with the buffer really comes to the forefront in residential areas where you have people who their largest investment in most cases is that place. And so an abutting property owner wants to use their property to do something like this. There's that wiggle room in the buffer that the planning board, has, and it creates an emotional conflict. There's some actual problems, there's some perceived problems. There are some objectively reasonable concerns. There are other concerns that are reasonable to an individual who's invested a significant amount of time and money in a property that maybe don't raise to the level of some other concerns that others may have. So I think the fundamental issues of the bylaw about where and how solar is allowed are sort of concentrated into the buffer and visual issue. And so I think that's where it's easy to say we just need to fix that. And I think it's a much more systemic problem with the bylaw and the way people view solar as a use.
Okay, well, and I would agree, but my only comment would be that as soon as we finish with marijuana.
Yeah, and I think that
one.
moving into April is the time to start looking at how the board wants to address that and how they may or may not want to change that.
Do we have an announcement for the two new public hearings?
Should be in your folder.
I didn't see them.
Can I ask one more question?
That one's been continued, so that,
Oh, okay.
I don't know,
The hearing is continued. You can't take
Okay.
more evidence.
Right.
So which one are we starting with?
The 380-400. All right, so next we have a public hearing for 380-400 Electric Avenue. Town of Lunenburg public hearing. The Lunenburg Planning Board will hold a public hearing on February 11th, 2019, 6:35 Joseph Bellata Meeting Room, Town Hall, 17 Main Street, Lunenburg, Mass., to hear and discuss a modification to site plan approval under Chapter 250, Section 8.4 of the Code of Lunenburg for relocation of an existing building and construction of a new building at 380-400 Electric Avenue, map 98, parcel 166. Owners applicants are Daniel and Jean Proctor, 1529 Mass Ave, Lunenburg, Mass. Materials are available for viewing at the planning office, 960 Massachusetts Ave, Lunenburg, Mass. 01462. Hey.
Thank you. Is this close enough? Yeah. My name's Greg Roy with Ducharme and Dillis, and I'm here representing Dan and Jean Proctor. I'm also here with Frank McPartland from my office, who will talk in a few minutes about, go into detail about the site design and how we laid it out. But I'm here today just sort of for a continuity standpoint, and just to kind of give you a brief history. I know that we have a few new members, so I wanted to go give you a little bit of a history into where we started a few years back, and fast forward you to this evening. 2 years ago, the Proctors approached us to permit the car wash site, which was permitted in the summer of 2017. It was went online December 2017. In that site plan that was submitted, it included the relocation of the office building, which is the red building. It included a new location for that, which was going to be in the front of the site, very similar in offset to Electric Ave as the car wash facility. It also included the construction of a bus parking area in the back of the site, and then the continued use of the westerly portion, sort of the upper level, for the uses that he's been using all along with storage of material and that kind of thing. Fast forward to this past summer, the Proctors were approached by a developer who was interested in developing a gas station project, which you'll hear after this meeting. I want to be careful not to talk about that, because there's the applicant for that and his engineer is here. But just from a history, I thought it was important to give you the context. So we went to the Zoning Board of Appeals this past summer to request several things. The Zoning Board of Appeals gave us special permit for dimensional variation on a couple of points. One, and a few of them are relevant to this site planning process. One of them was the width of the common driveway. We requested that the bylaw be, that we have relief from the 30-foot maximum width requirement to go to 40. So you'll see that our plans reflect that. We also, because of the development proposal of the gas station facility, it was necessary that we subdivide the property. So actually, a few months ago, we were before your board with the A&R plan process. That's now been resolved, and I believe we've recorded that plan. And so now we have two lots. One will be the car wash and the use that we're going to talk about today, which is the same use, the excavation business and the retail store, which is primarily going to be the equipment rental business. So all of those things are going to continue on the property, just in a slightly different location. The other relief we got from the zoning board was the ability to construct 3 curb cuts on Electric Ave. Your bylaw only allows 2 curb cuts per lot. So because of the way we were configuring the property, and we were using a shared driveway for both the proposed location for the excavation business and the shared entrance for the future gas station, it was necessary that we have 3 curb cuts on the lot for that will be the car wash and the retail facility. Those are the major points. We also got the special permit for the gas station use, but I'll let the other applicant speak to that in the next hearing. So I'm going to introduce Frank McPartland. Frank is our engineer, was the engineer working on this from our office, and he's going to go through and kind of give you an overview of the site. I know we've heard from Jeff as well. I always appreciate Jeff's timeliness. This was a quick turnaround. We just submitted this a few weeks ago, so we appreciate that. But I'll give the mic to Frank and step aside.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, board. I'm probably going to repeat some of what Greg said, just because of how I need to talk about the project and walk through it. The project had previously received a site plan approval. We've submitted for an amendment to that approval. The original approval that was previously granted was for the car wash development in the northern corner of the parcel and the relocation of the existing office building in this vicinity. That was granted June 2017. The car wash itself had 4 parking spaces. The relocated office building had 4 plus 1 accessible space. There was also, as Greg said, a bus parking area. And also permitted and constructed were stormwater management facilities consisting of an extended detention basin in this area, a grass swale running along the property line here, and an underground infiltration system at the rear of the car wash. The modifications to the site plan include the A&R subdivision of the property into Lot 1, which is the Proctor site, and Lot 2, which you'll be hearing a presentation from in the next hearing. The 40-foot wide common driveway serving the Proctor site as well as the gas station, but not serving the car wash. The new location for the relocated building, previously it was within the limits of the proposed common driveway, and that we shifted to the west, back towards the rear of the property. Also, a new Morton-style garage building is proposed at the rear of the property. This space is making up some of the space that would be demoed out of the A&R lot. The bus parking was eliminated with this development, although there is an equivalent total area for truck parking at the rear, at the southern edge of the property. The area of those 10 truck parking spaces is roughly equivalent to what the original bus parking was. The location of the relocated and proposed building was driven by an existing sewer easement that runs through the property, as well as setback lines and the wetland buffer. The client also expressed a desire to have clear sight lines from both Electric Avenue, the car wash, and the gas station to drive site traffic towards the rental and landscape portion of the business. The relocation of the building necessitated a reduction in the volume of that dry detention basin. This was subsequently made up with a new proposed underground detention system south of the driveway. This underground detention system is collecting runoff from the entirety of the gravel area, both buildings, and the driveway back to a ridge line at this point, which is roughly equivalent to the ridge line of the car wash design. So it's mimicking the existing drainage patterns. The site does meet Massachusetts stormwater standards, with the exception the recharge was done to the maximum extent possible due to the existing C&D soils on the site. They're fairly tight, as indicative of it being as close as it is to the wetlands. As I said, the site was designed to maintain existing drainage patterns, mimicking the grade break at the car wash. All of the modified areas now, instead of sheet flowing overland untreated, are collected by catch basins, and then go into the underground detention basin, then the modified dry basin, and from there into the existing wetland, following the previously permitted drainage pattern. This site is designed with accessible slopes throughout all of the pedestrian accessible areas. The grading of the gravel area is 5%. There is accessible parking at the proposed garage, at the proposed office. at the relocated office location, as well as additional parking in this area. Lunenburg Code states that office space requires 1 space per 1,000 square foot of gross floor area and loading space. Roughly on this site, there is, counting the office and the garage, there's 5,184 square feet of office, which works out to 6 parking spaces required. There's also a requirement that you have 1 square foot of parking area per 3 square feet of office space. This site, it works out to 1 per 1.8. We have 27 total parking spaces required. As I had previously discussed, there's the 10 truck spaces, which are for more or less Proctor vehicles. And then there are 17 passenger vehicle spaces located at this corner of the parcel and in front of the relocated building. The site is currently screened by existing fencing around the perimeter, as well as the replication vegetation that was planted for the previous application. The applicant has requested that there not be screening, visual screening between the Lot 1 and Lot 2 to help drive customers to his business. We have received the review letter from Graves Engineering this morning. We're in the process of addressing these comments. We're fairly well along. There didn't seem anything that would be a heavy lift to address quickly. A lot of clarifications. Does the board have any questions?
I do have a question about the truck parking and the vehicular parking along the westerly edge and, yep.
Along here?
Yep.
Yes.
That's, so you said it was gravel, that's durable dustless? Durable dustless surface?
Yeah, durable dustless surface. Very similar to what's out there now. It's a very hard packed, almost completely impervious gravel. I modeled the site in my stormwater calculations as completely impervious. So in the event that it does need to be paved in the future,
it's covered.
That the system would be able to handle that flow.
Excellent. And you said 6 passenger vehicles in the southwesterly corner?
So let me grab this. So here, there are, I want to say there's 6 spaces here total, including two accessible, and then 9 along this corner.
So, I'm sorry, am I to assume that the darker shade is the paved area and the lighter is gravel?
Correct. This is proposed to be immediately paved, and the rest of the site, the lighter site would be gravel.
Okay, so I guess my question was, the gravel parking, is that going to be for customers or for employees, or is it designated?
Hi, Dan Proctor, 1529 Mass Ave, obviously owner. So, customer parking in front of the building, employee parking over here, and then truck parking.
Thank you.
This is regrinds, from road, so, like he said, impervious. But ultimately, the game plan, as budget allows, pave everything.
Sure.
Yep.
So regrind actually is more durable, I believe, than the gravel.
That's correct. Yep.
So my concern was just that it wasn't for the public, that it's an employee use, so it doesn't need to be striped necessarily, and that was.
That's correct.
I've seen wrap striped, and it's not pretty.
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you. What do you guys got? No?
Just the applicant indicated that they're addressing the comments by Mr. Walsh, and, there are a number of, the biggest comments that stand out in my mind are the stormwater management calculations, and I think that you'll be addressing those comments and concerns that Mr. Walsh raised, so.
Correct, yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Frank. I wanted to say one other thing, because it was pertinent in the last discussion, and I wanted to make sure that we put it in the record. I wanted to talk about the sewer connection, the proposed sewer connection. If you recall, last time, we actually merged the lots to resolve the sewer, the issue of needing an easement across for a sewer line, which is, of course, not allowed by the Lunenburg sewer regulations. So I wanted to just point out that these lots comply with that regulation. Maybe you could point this out. The sewer will come from the car wash. The existing sewer service will come from the car wash right there and then come right down and connect to the sewer line, and it'll be completely on the property, and then we'll connect into that. We've already talked to Jack and the DPW about the program for doing that connection. And then the sewer again, I'll let the other applicants speak, but the sewer connection for this actually goes out Dana Street, so there would not be need for any easements on that. So that was a significant topic of discussion last time, so I wanted to make sure we were clear on that, so.
Okay, and just for clarification, you say you spoke with Jack, and that's DPW?
DPW, yes, sorry.
But I don't believe that they oversee sewer, do they?
Yes.
Does DPW oversee sewer?
You went to sewer too, didn't you? Sorry, Dan.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
I'm keenly aware that I have a member of the sewer commission burning a hole in the back. So careful.
So basically, you meet with Jack and you show him the plan, and he, makes his changes, comments, that type of thing. And then he makes recommendations to the sewer. We were scheduled to meet with the sewer tomorrow night. However, John Anderson just sent me an email that, for whatever reason, I guess they don't have enough people for a quorum, so that meeting got postponed. But we are on for the sewer. We're supposed to be tomorrow night. But again, you meet with Jack, you go over everything with him, and then he just gives his blessing to the committee.
Okay.
One of the comments relative to sewer that Mr. Walsh had was regarding the sewer manhole, and I don't know if you've had a chance to review that.
Yes, I will be revising the sewer manhole from a doghouse style to a standard manhole connection.
Okay, that's one of my big questions, because it talks about the potential for infiltration, and
Yes.
given the I&I issues, obviously, I want to make sure that doesn't happen.
I had gone with the doghouse style based on experience in other towns. They often prefer a doghouse as opposed to a standard manhole for this kind of connection because of II concerns. So sometimes it's a preference.
If Mr. Walsh could, because that just raises a question in my head, so if Mr. Walsh could address.
Nice to meet you. For the record, Jeff Walsh with Graves Engineering. I knew it was a new sewer service, and I know of the concerns that were raised with the original design and the connection that needed to be made down deeper in the high groundwater. So my thinking with a new sewer service, as much as I'm not a fan of Fernco's are flexible connectors that you can put on a pipe, and sometimes they're used to repair broken pipe. They're good, but the bell and spigot that comes with the original pipe is even better. But where I'm going with this is a doghouse manhole. You make the seal around the pipes with mortar, and you try to keep the pipe intact. The pipe coming, you basically have a pipe going through the ground. You excavate around it, you drop a manhole that's got two openings that look like the doorway of a doghouse. And then you seal it, but you seal it with mortar. And knowing that there can be high groundwater out there, and know it's a new sewer service, I thought they could cut back the pipes, put in a regular manhole, put the pipes in, use the Fernco connectors out here. And in my mind, that's more watertight than a doghouse manhole. Because it's got flexible connectors, rubber boots, stainless steel bands to tighten the rubber boots to the pipes, whereas it's not relying on mortar around the two connections. That's why, in my opinion, it presents less of a potential inflow and infiltration than the manhole. And it's a smaller diameter service. It's not a main line where you don't want to do that on, let's say, the 18-inch line that's out there.
Okay. Ultimately, that'll be the call of the sewer department.
That's how I see it.
And you indicated, and a copy of this did go to Jack Rodequins
It
and
did.
to Barb LaFave, so hopefully the sewer department will make the final decision on that.
Certainly, that's my recommendation, but,
Okay.
you know, certainly the sewer commission is the sewer department, whatever they feel is most appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we were in the process of making that plan revision one way or the other, so.
I would look for input from them before
Yes.
you make the change, so.
There's also a comment here, I'm assuming this was for, these were for this part. So the Board of Health, no, the Conservation, you met with on the 6th? Have we gotten, update?
We don't have any update on
No?
that.
Okay.
See, the comments that we received from the Board of Health primarily regarded just clarifying riverfront disturbance, as well as clarifying who would be responsible for what portion of the street sweeping of the common driveway, whether it was Proctor or the other developer, and they're working out whether it's going to be how that responsibility is going to be split up. So that will be documented in the final O&M manuals for the project.
Okay, thank you. All right, unless there's anything else you guys feel imperative.
Just so, as Frank said, we got, those are the primary comments from Concom, a few other ones. Our intention, as we always try to do, is to get everything out in front of us, so we had the comments from Conservation Commission, we have the staff comments, we have Mr. Walsh's comments, really interested to get anything that you folks have, and we're already working on the comments that we received from Concom, and as Frank said, we're better than halfway through the grave stuff, even just today. So we'd like to just wrap all this into one plan revision, likely middle of this week, I think, barring anything unforeseen here, and then get a complete revised set back to everybody, your board, sewer commission, conservation commission, and then we'll have a plan that everybody's, the same plan that everybody's looking at, so, thanks.
Ready to hear from people? Okay, so this, we'll get into the public comment. If anybody has anything to say about this project? Any questions, comments, concerns? Please step up.
I guess I have a problem with, what is the light?
I'm sorry, you need to, I apologize, you need to speak your name and
No,
address.
right now, there is so much noise that comes from this place, noise and dust. This comes right back to a buffer zone.
I'm sorry, not
What is a buffer zone?
Name and address, please?
Pardon?
Name and address, please?
Richard Schreiner, 57 John Street.
Thank you.
This is crazy. You know, when Proctor's purchased the property, first thing, there was woods there, okay? And it was residential lots. Now the town changed it to commercial and they purchased it. Now, my understanding was this was going to be landscaping. This is not landscaping. This is septic, this is gravel processing, this is everything. This is nothing but noise, dust, and more noise, 7 days a week. It's crazy. Now, how much lighting is this going to create? The place is lit up like a Christmas tree now. We have no peace and quiet anymore. It's disgusting. That's what I have to say about it, you know?
I'm glad you made your voice heard. That's what the public hearings are for, is so that, I mean...
It's absolutely crazy.
I don't
Defy you. You could never sleep in the morning if you wanted to. Because you hear slam, bang, fork trucks going over bumpy roads, tailgates slamming back and forth, front-end loaders, more loaders, backhoes. This starts early in the morning. It's crazy. It's not supplies, it's a business. It shouldn't be there. It should be an industrial park somewhere. And more lighting is going to come from this gas station, 24 hours a day, I'll betcha. So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing Mr. Schreiner's property. Which property is Mr. Schreiner's?
Right on John Street. John Street's right behind.
He indicated 57 John Street.
It's on the other side of the wetland, I believe, isn't it?
No, it's behind,
No, I don't think it shows on the plan, because I believe it's on the west side of John Street.
Okay, so it's not on the plan.
Because it looks like the abutting properties are the even side of John, so the odd
Okay,
side would be
okay.
the opposite side of the street.
it's right, John Street's over here.
Yeah, I know, and I'm looking, if you can look at the other plan, I'm just trying to orientate myself with
So
the...
Dana Street is another street that comes, I think it's Dana Street, right? That's the first one.
Dana
The first one is this first one.
That's right.
That's Dana Street right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then John Street is, it's right behind Proctor.
Okay, okay, thank you. Oh, I see.
I have some comments too, actually.
Because this is the even side, so yeah, so those
Only the
properties
even
front on
side is
John,
depicted
then
on the
there's
plan.
John. I believe he's on the,
Okay.
Yes, it's all residential, right behind Proctor.
Yeah, there were some properties on John Street shown on one of the plans that we have, but I didn't see 57, but I'm understanding it's on the opposite side of the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
My name is Sako Kelfayan, 44 John Street, Lunenburg.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My main concern is like Richard was saying, the noise, the lights, and is this gas station going to be 24 hours?
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
No.
And another thing is, I agree with him in ways of, the noise and, my backyard is right there too. I'm at 44, so, I don't know about you, but on the weekends, I like to hang out in my backyard, have a cookout, have friends come over. The car wash is fine. It doesn't make that much noise, but when we first came here, 2017, when I came here, when we discussed the lighting issue on the car wash, they didn't say that the lights were going to be in the back of the car wash on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The place is lit up like a Christmas tree.
24 hours a day?
Yes. There's lights on the back of the garage, 24 hours that you can see as clear as day behind our house. Behind our house. You can see it. It's not, I don't see that big of an issue, but my major concern is having this gas station on Electric Ave, 24 hours a day with a drive-through donut shop. That's my main concern, because down the street, there's a Cumberland Farms.
The gas station we have to talk about next. Right now, I appreciate your concerns, and I hope you'll get back up when we open that hearing, but this is not the hearing on the gas station.
Oh, it isn't?
No.
This is just the...
The excavation and retail office.
Okay,
I'm sorry, that's why I said we're not there yet.
All right, we're not there. That's another meeting.
Yep.
It's
Well,
right
that's
behind this one.
It's next.
It's next on the
Okay. All right. So I jumped the gun, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak on this project? Okay, seeing none?
Thank you. I'd just like to address a couple of questions, concerns that just came up. First of all, the 7 days a week, we are not open on Sundays. Our hours on Saturday are 7 till 3 o'clock. During the spring and summer season, this time of the year, winter time, we're open 8 till noon. So we're not open 7 days a week. We never have been open 7 days a week, only if my sand trucks get called out, because I have a contract with Mass Highway. So if they get called out, we go snow plowing. They leave the site, they come back. I understand the concerns of the neighborhood, okay? Honestly, this should be in their best interest that this project goes through, because what I'm trying to do is downsize my whole operation, which is gonna happen because I'm losing this piece of land. I'm hoping to pave everywhere other than the green space that has to stay there. So when we talk about noisy forklift bouncing over bumpy roads, hopefully that'll be alleviated. That's what I'm trying to accomplish. So ultimately, everything is getting downsized. We sell less products, unlike everybody else in the small business world. I can't afford to keep a lot of inventory, so we're reducing inventory. We're just selling the products that move the most, the simplest, that type of mentality. That's really what this project is all about.
I do have a question. Is there any additional lighting proposed on this site? Can you talk about the lighting of this particular site?
So, we have proposed just the relocation of one existing light. It was located basically in the middle of where the relocated building is going, and we shifted it east towards Electric Avenue. So that there was just the one additional, not additional, just one light relocation proposed for the Proctor site.
So, we're, really interested if you have any other comments to get them, so we can, like I said, to kind of put everything together for the next time.
All right, so there was no lighting plan submitted, is that correct?
C5.
There was, okay. So,
Again, it's just a relocation of that pole light. There'll be some lights on the building for, safety, ingress, egress at the doors, but.
So the light to the east of the sewer pump station currently exists? That's shown on sheet
You
C5?
got anyone down there, Frank?
Looks to be it's sort of in the middle of the landscape island between the two properties, north and east of the sewer pump station.
There's this thing.
Which sheet is it?
C5.
C5 is. You're correct. We do have one proposed light. I misspoke. There is the relocated light at the relocated light at the relocated building, and then a single light along the property line between the gas station and the parking lot.
And those concentric circles, I don't know if you can see them on your plans, but those circles are the foot candle readings. The outer one is the 0.1 foot candle, so you can see that and those would be downward shield, like everything nowadays, shielded light, full cutoff fixture, pointed down, towards the ground. And those dashed lines are the illumination levels. 0.1 foot candle is sort of the minimum that you can record. So anything past that, you'd experience pretty dark conditions. And those circles are completely contained on the property. A little bit of spillage onto Lot 1, but nothing onto the abutting property.
further questions, concerns, comments?
I just really, going back to the Mr. Walsh's letter, he talks about stormwater specifically relative to the sediment forebay, and I don't know if you've addressed that. That what it says is the proposed drainage system discharges to the existing basin appear to be located outside of the existing sediment forebay. It's number 20, and I just want to understand how you're going to address that concern.
We can propose, we can design an additional forebay to wrap similar to we can have the forebay wrap around the proposed discharge similar to the ones elsewhere on the basin.
Okay. Okay. And total suspended solids, he had questions regarding the calculations because it refers to subcatchments and there are no subcatchments.
Yes, the TSS spreadsheets, I had changed my subcatchment labeling on my design from from the car wash to this current iteration, and I had neglected to update the tables, the table headings, so that's a bookkeeping issue that will be addressed.
Okay, and the HydroCAD model, he mentions that the model uses unconnected pavement areas where the pavement is essentially contiguous.
Another bookkeeping error, yes.
Okay.
Both are 98 impervious.
Okay. And you're we're wrapping that sediment forebay?
Yes.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
And just to be clear, when we reviewed those, there's no comments there that we think we have to discuss with you. We anticipate addressing all of those comments to the satisfaction of Mr. Walsh. So a lot of times we'll come here and there'll be a handful of them that we want to talk to you about because there might be some interpretation things or some engineers hate to say it, but things that exist in the gray, not in the black and white. We don't see any of those here. Really, we think we can address them pretty easily to the satisfaction of Mr. Walsh. So we're not asking for any clarifications or anything on those. So. Okay, and the applicant, if I understood correctly, is not proposing any change in hours or any change in operation. The existing hours will remain the same. Yeah, hours and use. So no change of use on this application. It's just a change in location of structures.
Super. And you would concur as well? Yeah?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, quite frankly, I don't feel any of my comments are fatal to the project. Number of engineering issues, bookkeeping items, if you will, but nevertheless, I don't see anything that rises to the level what I would consider a fatal flaw or have a major impact on layout or some design intent in this project. One thing, though, I do want to point out, in reviewing both this project and the project I want to speak of at the next public hearing, as I was wrapping up the review of this, the light bulb went off. I think there's a drain line, or there's enough information between the two sets of plans that, there's a wetland here and there's a drain line shown across here. And the plans, I just want to make sure that if this wetland relies on this drain line to cause any backup of water on this property, that the drainage be maintained across both of the projects. That's the important thing I want to point out to the board at this time, is that between the two projects, there were proposals here, I think, to cut and cap the pipe. I just want to make sure that, again, if there's an outlet to this area, and the potential for flooding here is alleviated by this drain line, that with both projects, that drainage path be maintained.
This wetland here.
Thank you.
Actually flows south to, there's another drain pipe here, and then provides relief out to Electric Avenue. So it is not connected across the parcels to this. It doesn't run to the north.
Sure.
My name is Richard Trank. My address is 44 Otis Street. I own the property right here, which is currently up for sale. I should say my father had a storm drain installed here that comes out to the main line going down along Route 13. What has happened over the years is somebody put two illegal pipes under Dana Street. Those pipes are draining behind the old Citgo station, and that is what the water is collecting here because, well, let me give you a little background. The swamp that you see here started here. 50 years ago, this swamp went all the way down. And Dana Street was a proposed road circling back to 13, which the state said no. But that's the property that you're looking at. But this little bit of wetlands here, it's not really wetlands. It used to be a drain, but it was blocked off a long time ago by Sky Cycle. They put a pipe in the ground with no possible collection point. So the grade is sloped down here, and the water coming out from underneath Dana Street is piling up right here. So I hope that clears that little wetland.
It actually muddies it a little bit, but thank you for the information.
Any other questions or comments?
So I know we have some work to do. We've already told you that we've started. We anticipate getting these comments addressed pretty quickly. We're working on them. So we would appreciate, I know your agenda is filling up here on the 25th, but we'd sure appreciate to be there. I think we could, be in a position to have all the information addressed.
You want the 25th?
Well in advance. If we could have the
Yeah.
25th, we'd certainly appreciate it.
And that would result in information being submitted no later than
7 days.
The Tuesday prior by 4 p.m.
The Concom has told us that they want them a week ahead as well, and we're before them next week. So we're targeting to submit close of business Wednesday this week, so I think we can.
So
meet your 7 days.
the only issue with that would be the sewer commission, where they have a couple of, I won't say significant issues, but certainly things that are within their purview that would potentially affect the development of the site, and,
So there may be, that could be the case, but I think that everything that we know today, we can clean up. We're planning to clean up middle of this week in a plan revision. So there may be a few, things that we don't know today, but that's our intention. So.
Very good.
So I would make a motion to continue the public hearing to February 25th at 6:35.
Second.
Excellent. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we need the other one, the other announcement. So now we have a public meeting for 400 Electric Avenue. Town of Lunenburg, public hearing. The Lunenburg Planning Board will hold a public hearing on February 11th, 2019, 6:35 Joseph Bellata Meeting Room, Town Hall, 17 Main Street, Lunenburg, Mass., to hear and discuss applications for a special permit and for site plan approval under Chapter 250, Section 4.5 and 8.4 of the Code of the Town of Lunenburg for construction and operation of a retail motor fuel outlet and convenience store with a drive-through at 400 Electric Avenue, map 98, parcel 166-2. Owners are Daniel and Jean Proctor, 1529 Mass Ave, Lunenburg, Mass. Applicant is NJLJ Properties LLC, care of Mickey Higgins, 280 Air Road, Harvard, Mass. Materials are available for viewing at the Planning Office, 960 Mass Ave, Lunenburg, Mass. 01462. Welcome.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Patrick McLaughlin. I'm a civil engineer with MHF Design Consultants out of Salem, New Hampshire, here tonight representing NJLJ Properties. Although Frank did an incredible job with that red laser pointer, I'm not good with one of those, so my show is going to be a bit more of a traveling act here. So based on the previous presentation, we're aware of where the property is situated. So this plan is at a larger scale, so I'm at 20 scale. So the subdivided property that Greg spoke of, which was all basically whited out, is what we're looking at here, with the Proctor development being kind of somewhat off the page, but his relocated facilities are up in the back here. So this is the same shared driveway. As Greg had kind of given the history, the Proctors and Greg were before the ZBA over the summer to get some specific relief in order to allow for the kind of coincidental development of the two different projects, including the 40-foot driveway width for the shared driveway,
as a necessity from that relief, we ended up with some kind of redundant housekeeping relief, meaning that we ended up with a driveway that was a bit closer to this proposed lot line than what the driveway regulations would say. So it was, if you're granting one relief, you're looking at it from both perspectives. As Greg mentioned, there are 3 curb cuts for what would be the Proctor parcel, which is 166-1. So concurrently on 166-2, which is the proposed parcel for the gas station development, we actually only end up with 1 curb cut. So equivalently across the entire frontage that exists today would be 4 curb cuts, including the 2 that service the car wash now. But because we're using a shared point of access, that created 3 on the Proctor parcel. So we, through an easement which is being worked on currently through NJLJ Properties and the Proctors, there will be an access easement granted to allow vehicular access in through this side driveway, if you will. So the development as you see it is hopefully very similar to another site in town that you're aware of, which is the Honey Farms on Leominster Shirley Road. This site plan is not exactly a spitting image, but really close. It's the same developer. So that project came before the planning board in, I want to say it was 2013, and was constructed. And so it's a business that operates in town, and would like to continue to grow and be a part of the community, but this time over in the Electric Ave area. And so very similar to the site as you would frequent it over on Leominster Shirley Road. This is a 4,250 square foot convenience store building. Architecture would basically replicate what is on the other side of town. Similar to that, there's also a rear drive-through use proposed with the drive-through window, in this case on the southern side, but the left side of the store as you're looking at it. Again, very similar fashion to the existing site. There is a retail fueling area in the front, which is obviously, the canopy and the islands that we're all used to pulling up to. This proposal is for 4 fueling islands, which equates to 8 fueling locations, being double-sided. So again, the 2 points of access, both being proposed as full access driveways, meeting the 30-foot wide curb cut requirements by the town. There are 29 proposed parking spaces, which Graves commented on, and we can talk through that a little bit once I get into those comment letters. As part of the request, the drive-through use actually requires a special permit through this board, and so we have applied for that, and this drive-through meets the special permit criteria, which would include a provision for 10 vehicle stacking spaces. So we have those shown. Those provisions require that the drive-through service location be either on the side or rear of the building, which we accommodate, and that any vehicle stacking not impede other on-site circulation patterns, and that's what, we have a dedicated bypass lane, if you will, that is separate from the striped stacking lane. Similar to the Proctor project, we have been hot on their tails. Every agenda item they've been on, we've been right behind them. So we've been to conservation already, received comments from them. To reiterate those, it was, just a clarification and basically establishing who's going to be responsible for O&M maintenance of the shared driveway. There was some discussion about stormwater. This project meets all DEP stormwater criteria, and I can go through those as little or as much as the board would like. This project, is within the buffer zones for the wetland that was just recently mentioned on the southern abutting property, as well as buffer zones from the larger wetland across Electric Ave, and so accordingly, we've made that conservation filing. We are within the 30-foot no disturbance zone associated with the off-site wetland system to the south, but this is an area that is completely fully disturbed already by the hard packed gravel conditions that are out there now on the existing site. And so we're preparing, we're proposing to restore almost all of that to pervious cover once again. And the commission did ask that I provide that in a tabulated summary, just identifying how much of that square footage within their local 30-foot buffer is being restored. There's just a small area of a couple of parking spaces in the rear that would remain as pavement. And as I iterated to them, this layout is really what we know works. This applicant, we've done a number of developments with them throughout New England, and so we're not looking to have any more pavement, any more parking or anything than we know works. And so the extent of this development, conveniently enough, the lot sizing worked out as we look to create a subdivided parcel to accommodate this use, but the layout and then backtracking into the lot lines was kind of a part of that. But Greg touched on a couple of the other items, being the location of the sewer and not having some private sewer easements needed to make some utility connections. But really this is what this development and this developer, really this is what they need. We're not looking to go above and beyond. So we think that the parking count is adequate for this size building. This building gets built in a number of neighboring towns here in Massachusetts. So with respect to the layout, that's really it. I can just briefly touch on stormwater unless anyone has any questions on site layout right now. And just do some questions maybe later on. So stormwater wise, as I mentioned, we meet the DEP criteria. So this site will essentially be its own closed drainage system. So this curbing, that's kind of the first starting point for a closed drainage system is the curbing. That's your gutter line barrier to capture everything at your designated low points. So we have on-site catch basins, which are hooded outlets and have deep sumps. So we're starting to get some pre-treatment criteria there. The portions in the front of the site around the fueling facility, those are proposed to receive the required 80% TSS removal and go to an underground detention system, which is watertight closed pipe. And then that detention system ultimately discharges through an existing drain line that will exist with a drainage easement granted from the Proctors to NJLJ Properties for discharge towards the wetlands. So we're not proposing to provide groundwater recharge for the areas associated with the fueling use. DEP consider those a LUPL, a land use with high potential pollutant load. And so it's pretty common practice that we don't promote groundwater recharge from those areas. But subsequently, there is a DEP standard for groundwater recharge. So what we're doing is we're providing recharge of the roof and the canopy and the areas in the rear of the site which are not associated with that fueling use. And we're providing recharge via a separate underground system to accommodate that criteria of the DEP standards. So yeah, so there's no new drainage outlet connections. We had, in speaking with Dan and kind of some history of the neighborhood, as well as speaking with Jack at DPW, it's our understanding that at certain times there is somewhat of a capacity issue with the town's municipal drainage system out along Electric Ave. So as a kind of a, I guess, an approach to alleviate alleviate that. We're not sending any drainage out towards that way, although there are some discharge pipes and a significant amount of stormwater that goes there now from the Proctor site. So from a stormwater point of view, we're achieving, you know, all the objectives. Sewer, we were supposed to be at Sewer Commission tomorrow night, but I thought it was that they didn't want me to have to drive all the way down from New Hampshire in the snowstorm, but it sounds like maybe they just don't have a quorum anyway, so. But yeah, the sewer connection, which, again, we're not allowed to have a connection through a private easement. Lucky for us, the 18-inch gravity line that runs down Dana Street actually ends up onto this proposed parcel. So the town has an easement over a portion of what will be the new 166-2 lot, and also has an easement over a portion of the Proctor's lot for the pumping station itself. And so we were lucky enough to have pretty much a straight shot out our back door to tie in. Again, we sat with Jack and discussed that and have submitted to the commission, but we'll see them at whatever their rescheduled upcoming meeting date is. I'll probably put the color one back up for everyone's benefit right now. The ZBA did approve hours of operation at their meeting. They approved the convenience store for 24 hours and the drive-through operation to be limited from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. and that is noted on this site plan for the record. And lighting, I do have a lighting plan. Again, we're using, you know, downward cutoff fixtures. The lighting plan shows, you know, compliance with, you know, with little to no light trespass. We're also, you know, we're including a white vinyl fence 6 feet high along the southern property line. It is our understanding that that property is zoned commercially, but has been used in somewhat recent history as a residential home. So we're trying to accommodate some buffering there. The properties up off of Dana Street actually sit higher in elevation by a few feet. So any real noise or headlight traffic from vehicles at the car wash will almost just basically be absorbed into that berm, if you will, which is kind of displayed on the grading plan a little bit better, but it'll be, you know, a good probably 4 feet higher as you get up to Dana Street than you will be as you're a vehicle rounding the back of the convenience store building. So we do believe there's adequate buffering, but would be, you know, open for some discussion on that. I'll just quickly address that. Again, we've received comments from Graves. Again, we don't see any of these as impactful to the development. There are just a couple that I want to discuss with the board so that we can get proper action moving forward. As luck would have it, the first one. The loading zone. So this current layout does not offer a dedicated loading zone. The original thought behind that was, again, we're not asking for any more of a sprawling development than we need operationally. You know, the developer knows what works. The site on the other side of the town does have a dedicated loading zone. It's something that we would accommodate here if it was to the board's pleasure. The other part of that was we also understood that, you know, we were going to be going to the Conservation Commission, so, you know, less impervious coverage is certainly a benefit that they would look at with respect to proximity to their buffers, and there was also, you know, the evident thought that the town has the sewer easement in the rear of the parcel now. So again, trying to leave them as much, you know, undisturbed area back there as needed. We did talk to Jack when we met with him to discuss this, and he didn't necessarily have any concerns because even a paved loading zone would in theory give them adequate access to their facilities, and we still wouldn't be located directly over top of their main. So with the perspective that we have now, we can certainly look to accommodate a loading zone similar to what we have on the other site if the board would prefer that. So that's comment number one. Comment number two, I guess I am looking for some direct feedback from the board, as well as maybe some additional commentary from Jeff and Adam, just in terms of how this, the square footage of the parking regulation is actually quantified. So I have a figure.
And that's what you passed us? Yes. That's what you passed us.
Do you have the sighting plan in the packet? Because I'm not seeing one.
So this is actually a figure that I just prepared this afternoon in hopes to maybe facilitate a little bit of commentary with Jeff and Adam on this topic before being here tonight. So I'm hoping that Jeff's had a chance to look at this. It just basically outlines how we did come up with the calculation, because we're looking at a total square footage of calculated parking area versus, a lot of regulations would look to come up with an actual number of striped spaces. And so looking back, we worked with this applicant, on their other site in town back in 2013, and so we calculated the square footage in a very similar manner to how it was approved at that point, and how we've actually seen it done to accommodate similar regulations in other towns. But essentially, what we're doing is also accounting for the necessary access aisle associated with the parking spaces. So for the angled spaces on either side of the buildings, we actually calculate the 16-foot aisle needed to get to those. And in the front of the building, we accommodate a 24-foot aisle there as well, so we don't take the full width all the way out to the fueling facilities. The regulation specifically discusses to exclude driveways. So I don't know if at the time in 2013, if there was I won't use the word precedent, but I guess a methodology of how it was being calculated back then. But we certainly feel that we meet the intent of the ordinance. We're not counting driveways, we're not counting any added pavement that really isn't associated with the direct access to the parking spaces. So I'm looking for some feedback on that. 29 striped spaces basically equates to about 1 per 100 and, I want to say it was like 160 square feet, which is certainly adequate for retail. So I'd be looking for some feedback on that. And then really just to finish up on the comments, the only other one that really stuck out was comment number 10 under stormwater. And it discusses adding a means to shut off discharge from those fueling areas that I discussed. We have done this upon request on some other sites previously, so we have a mechanism to accommodate that, and that's a change that can easily be made within the context of the closed drainage system that we've already proposed. So simple modification to that. So we really don't have any. There's not a lot of action items for the rest of Jeff's comments. So.
Thank you, Patrick. Good evening again. For the record, Jeff Walsh with Graves Engineering, peer review consultant for the planning board. Let me start with the parking. I was out of the office this afternoon, checked my emails from home late, and I saw that an email came through. I'd like to take a look at this and get back to you. The challenging thing that I was having when I reviewed the parking and wrote the comment was how many square feet of what? The parking only, or the parking in the access aisle? And I wasn't sure. I've seen nowadays most communities do have X number of spaces, but I have seen a few communities that talked with square feet, and just as was presented by Mr. McLaughlin, talks to the square footage of the parking space in the immediate access aisle, but not the driveway. So I hear the point. My concern is I just want to make sure there's enough parking that's compliance with the town requirements. We do have access as engineers to other traffic data and now parking data, the Institute of Traffic Engineers, and I'm sure this board has seen it with the traffic studies. There's trip generation rates prepared by the Institute of Traffic Engineers. Well, they've started a database on parking generation rates. And it's a work in progress. It's usable data, but there is not the volume of data there that there is for the trip generation rates. I'm charged with reviewing this for general engineering in compliance with the zoning bylaw, so I want to make sure it meets the bylaw, but to that point, if it comes down to it, I could talk to you. We have a copy of the traffic generation rates, and again, I feel you gotta use it with caution because, again, there's limited data there. But nevertheless, I want to make sure it meets the bylaw, and I'll take care of looking at this. With respect to the loading space, again, I want to make sure they meet the bylaw. And some facilities can have, okay, we take our deliveries in trailer truck, but we take them in off-peak hours. We can bring them into an area, occupy some parking spaces, get the truck unloaded and send them on his way. If that makes the site work and doesn't have impacts to traffic in Electric Avenue, impacts on other abutters, but then again, the other abutter is, there's really not an abutter that would rely on vehicles passing through what I would consider a reasonable loading space on this site. Nevertheless, I would want to make sure that we know where the trailer truck is going to go for the delivery to the convenience store. They went through an exercise of the turning movements over to the fuel storage tanks in the southeast corner of the site. And, yeah, that's typical of gas deliveries, and everything works fine there. But again, it's the trailer truck or the short trailer truck coming up to the building I want to make sure can be dealt with, and whether it's a dedicated space or it's just encumbering some other space on off-peak hours, I want the board to understand what they're proposing. And lastly, to the shut-off, because the site basically from about here to here, this is the stormwater from this area of the site is, can you hear me all right? Yeah. Okay. It's considered stormwater with land use of a bit higher potential pollutant load. The stormwater handbook does call for a shutdown, and I'm not looking for a fancy, expensive shutdown, but I do like the fact that there is a watertight system here for attenuation. So whether the shutdown is at the surface before the water gets in, or makes use of the volume in here and it's shut down after the stormwater detention system, I'd leave it up to the design engineer. But the important thing is, if there's a spill worthy of a shutdown, the shutdown can occur quickly. That's the important thing in my eyes.
I have a question about the fueling area. For containment, I mean, as far as a spill, are you talking like a major spill, like somebody's delivering and that?
That's how I see it, because typical of any fueling area now, the perimeter of the concrete, if you notice it, the fueling area is scored, or it's got grooves troweled in, and that to me that's to address the de minimis spills, the small spills a little bit. Maybe it'll take a few gallons. We've even gone through the math of how much volume is it. Now, does it have to be level? Does it not have to be level? And last time I checked in the regulations, which was a while ago, it doesn't speak to level. But the point is, it's a way to trap some of the small amounts of spill. I'm thinking a larger spill. That's the reason for the shutdown. There's a problem with the fueling line between the tanker and the tanks or something like that. Now, the operator of the truck is there, he's monitoring it, but nevertheless, between when he realizes something going on and something shuts down, there could be some volume spilled, and that's what this shutdown of the drainage system would be all about.
Okay, it was the de minimis, the small things that add up to larger volumes that I was actually asking about. So there's the scored pavement.
There's the scored pavement, and there's also hoods within the catch basins, so floating material wouldn't go down the drainage system. If I remember right, there's water quality units on this as well. So there's, your first line of defense is the scored pavement if something occurs within the fueling area. The second line of defense is if it occurs anywhere within the front of the building, the catch basins have hoods on them, and there's a few gallons that can be stored, quite a few gallons that can be stored in each catch basin because of the hoods. And then when the water goes downstream of that, and I apologize, I just reviewed these things within the last few days, and then you do have proprietary treatment units. I wanted to be sure of that before I spoke to that. There is additional volume in the proprietary storage, the proprietary water treatment units for oils and greases and other floatables.
Okay.
So to that point, the de minimis that could build up over time, you would see that built up in the catch basins or in the proprietary units.
Okay. And the scored areas are below the awning, the covering, so they won't be subject to rainwater?
Not until there's windy rain. But there are specific regulations about the scores and so forth, and I can't recite them, but yeah, if it's a non-windy rain, the scores are there. And to your point, water is one thing that could take up the volume because gasoline's lighter than water, so gasoline wouldn't sit to the bottom of the groove and force the water up. It would be just the opposite. Right. And also, they need to be cleaned from time to time. Sand and debris and so forth certainly needs to be cleaned out of them periodically, and that goes to the maintenance of the facility, sweeping and so forth of the vehicle areas.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the waivers that you're requesting is the traffic, transportation, and circulation impact report, and I'd like to understand the reasoning behind that waiver. One of the concerns that I have is the potential traffic impact to the area.
Sure. Really certainly Electric Ave is a street that has, a significant load of daily trips. That's the primary reason for selecting a location like this for this developer. So, the thing about this type of use is really, maybe you do, maybe you wake up or you're sitting on your couch and you say, I really want to go get gas on Electric Ave, but I don't think most people think that way, and so this is looked at as basically a pass-by type use, meaning they're drawing vehicles off of their already traveled path. So a use like this, similar to the car wash, won't generate a ton of new trips to the vicinity. They're really trying to gain pulling vehicles off of that roadway as they're already traveling past.
But the addition of a donut facility does change, in my mind, does potentially draw people to that area. Because people do wake up and say, I want to go to Dunkin' Donuts. So that's my concern. While I understand, you mentioned the facility on, the other facility in town, the other gas station on Leominster Shirley Road, I'm very familiar with that facility, and there's a lot of traffic. So that's one of my concerns. I need more rationale for why we would waive that requirement, because that's one of my concerns. Additionally, I have a concern about the lighting, and I'd like to better understand that. I've been going through the plans trying to find the lighting plan that you talked about, and I'm not seeing it, and maybe you can point me to that or go over that, but obviously some of the residents have talked on the last hearing, talked about the lighting of the area. So I'd like to understand the specifics of your lighting plan.
Sure, thanks. So on the lighting, you'll find the lighting plan probably 3/4 of the way towards the back. It's going to be past all the site detail sheets, which are numbered through 14, and then we get into some page 1 of 1. So it's just before any of the architectural elevations. and I'll see if I can grab it.
I can't find it.
Paula.
So, similar to the plan that Greg and Frank were showing, where they had kind of some spiraling, dash lines to identify lighting values. This plan does it basically, with actual numbers. And so we have, maybe I can get another set of hands up here to help me. Don't everyone run. Thank you. So, excuse me, the site lighting package includes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 freestanding new light poles. And they're really intended to provide, an adequate, safe level of on-site lighting. Certainly underneath the canopy has, very conventional lighting as to what you would expect underneath the fueling canopy, and there are a couple of architectural and safety lights on the new building itself. But the freestanding site lights are 15-foot high poles, with downward facing fixtures. If you are familiar with the other site across town, my GPS sends me that way. So when I leave all my meetings here in town, I end up back at the highway over there. And so I'm passing there at night. So I have actually seen it lit up at night. And I would say that those lights really do not propose, much, if any, light trespass onto the neighboring, properties or really even out onto the roadways. And so this site's very similar to that. Certainly we abut the Proctor development on two sides, with the south side being the abutting property, and right along that property line we're at 0.0 to 0.1 lighting values. And so the lighting really is intended just to adequately light, the developed area.
Thank you.
Thanks. And just to touch briefly on the traffic, we can request a waiver, and certainly we're here to discuss that with you. So if it's to the board's benefit to provide, a trip generation summary for the proposed use, then we can do that, understanding that, having that for the record and understanding how this site, will, there are a couple of these, unlike the previous proposal, these are new proposed uses to the property. So we can certainly provide a trip generation memo if it's to the board's satisfaction.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something now that may or may not go over real well with some people, but the car wash was something new with a lot more trips than just the landscaping area. And now you're proposing a drive-through with the gas station, 24-hour service. So, I mean, had we known that there were going to be 2 excessive funnels of traffic on and off of the state road through the town, we probably would have asked for an analysis long before this. But, I mean, I'm not quite sure that the state considers this their road, even though it is Route 13. I mean, are you required to get a Mass Highway curb cut plan for the? We are not. No?
Control. Local control.
Local control. So, I mean, this is probably our second, maybe third heaviest traveled road in town. I mean, and it's really not just grabbing people off the road, it's people with a full cup of coffee in their lap, pulling into the road. And it's right down the street from an intersection. I certainly think that it requires some at least some looking at the volumes of traffic coming and going. And again, that's just my opinion.
I would totally concur. I'm concerned because it is a new use, the potential, the drive-through, the donuts, the gas station. I'm very concerned about the potential impact and specifically the intersection. We're all familiar with the heavy traffic on Electric Ave, and I'm concerned about the impact that this project will have for that. So I would want to see a traffic impact report.
I agree. I think, if you look at the station at the other end of town, there was never a line at the end of Lancaster Ave in the morning. Now there is. And there's a reason for it. Part of it's probably attributed to the fact that you can get through Orchard Park to get to Route 2 and 190. But I think part of it is the draw. I'm a little bit concerned about the parking calculations. The site at Leominster Shirley Road, in my mind, turns into a zoo at times as you have diesel trucks waiting for the one diesel island and they're towing a trailer and the trailer's right out to the road, and the loading zone would concern me as well. Especially if if the ZBA approved the drive-through use for certain hours, then that would eliminate your ability to restock the donut facility when they're closed. I would assume that they would probably close if they can't run the drive-through. I'm making that assumption, but, yeah.
Yeah, I share the concern about the loading area as well. Because I think that the potential site is tight, and I think when you've got deliveries for the retail store as well as the donut facility, I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely needs a loading area.
Mr. Chairman, if I may barge into the
Please
discussion.
do.
With respect to the traffic impact analysis, I'd suggest to the board that they make it clear to the applicant the desires of what the traffic impact report should address. Is it just vehicle trips, or is it more so? And to that point, my feeling is if you're going to investigate traffic, I'd be concerned not only with trip generations, but more importantly is potential impacts to the intersections here and here, and the potential of impacting traffic moving down either was it southbound or northbound on Electric Avenue. My feeling is that the morning commuter traffic is more so southbound. So this site lends itself nicely to take a right turn in, get your coffee, take a right turn out and continue on. But nevertheless, there could be circumstances that, I only come up here every so often and I do drive through the area, not for business as well. But my point is I don't know the traffic patterns real well. And my concern is if the traffic associated with this use, whether it's at the common driveway or if it's at the dedicated southern entrance, if there are turning movements that cause delays that have an impact to Route 13. It's not on the state jurisdiction, so the state doesn't have a bite at the apple. It's all at the town level. And again, the turning movements would be my thought. So for them to do that, I believe they'd have to go through a traffic count on Route 13 and then apply their traffic in a similar fashion, how much southbound, how much northbound, and evaluate the delays, if you will, at the intersections. Personally, I'm not so concerned with the delays coming out of the intersection. That's part of the business. The drivers self-impose the delay by using the business. I'm concerned about the potential delays of traffic in one direction or the other, especially, most importantly, in the morning. Yep.
You hit the nail on the head for me.
Yes, most definitely.
Thank you.
If I can get as much feedback as possible, Jeff, what would be your thoughts on expanding it to the intersection at Whalum Road? I'm not a traffic engineer by trade, so I will kind of not offer too much comment on that, but I don't necessarily feel, in my opinion, that it maybe warrants that, but maybe Jeff has.
I believe it does.
I too am not a traffic engineer. On the conservative side, the analysis should include that. I've got a feeling you're going to find that the impact to the signalized intersection just to the south of the site is probably negligible, but never, and what it does is it would, analyzing that intersection would cause them to analyze traffic through that intersection under existing conditions in all four directions, instead of just looking at northbound and southbound traffic counts by way of a automatic traffic count. It's more work. I can't say for certain it's going to be negligible impact, but I'd be surprised if there was any meaningful impact to that signalized intersection.
I think there may be impact, and I would like to see it analyzed.
That's this board's prerogative, and I won't disagree with you.
I honestly think it's far enough removed from the intersection that it would have minimal impact. And I'm sure that, I mean, as straight as that road is, I don't think there's any problem with sight distance.
Agreed.
The problem I can see is the queuing and the turning movements interrupting the through traffic on the road. And I'm not quite sure what kind of analysis there would be. I mean, you've got the daily traffic flows and then the projected arrivals and departures.
Well, what they would do is they'd look at the peak hour, and they'd assign turning movements in and out based upon the traffic flow northbound and southbound on Electric Ave. It's a statistics-based type of approach, but what it does is it basically just tries to mathematically look at the number of turns into the facility, whether they're right turn or left turn, and look at the delays that may cause as a vehicle's queued. In other words, if there's a lot of southbound movements and not so many northbound, there's going to be, the traffic northbound is going to be delayed more so to make a left because it's looking for the space between cars. And the nearest light is up there at Mass Ave, so it's a little ways away. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a light? Yeah, I think the nearest light is Mass Ave.
No, the nearest light is Whalum
Go
Road.
by the new storage facility.
No.
Whalum on the south.
No,
Mass Ave on the north.
Oh, no, yeah, Mass Ave.
Okay, because I'm worried, where I'm going with this is that if the southbound traffic is so tight that there's not many openings, then northbound traffic looking to make a left in the facility doesn't have the opportunity to make that left turn and starts to queue and immediately backs up traffic on the northbound side of Route 13, in theory. And then the traffic engineers would have to go through the analysis and take a look at that. Again, I expect in the morning, when demand for the coffee shop is greater, there's more southbound commuter traffic going to Route 2, so you got more right turns in, right turns out, and not as many vehicles coming from the south. You will have some local and commuters going to the north, but nevertheless, I think the demand would be more so coming from the south, but the traffic engineers would have to go through that, take a look at it.
I think it makes sense to look at the other intersection as well. I think they're going to do the traffic analysis. I think we should include both intersections and look at the traffic impacts.
Sure.
Both intersections being the two here and the one at Whalum, is it Whalum Road that's just south of?
Whalum Road, yep.
I don't think it's necessary to go as far north as Mass Ave.
Right, right.
Yeah, okay.
And I'd be hard pressed to even say that, I mean, let alone the impacts to the site design, I'm not quite sure that it would fix anything by eliminating one of the curb cuts. I don't think.
It'd make it worse.
No.
Right.
You'd have more of a line.
Well,
Right. Right.
And otherwise, I think it's pretty well laid out. I mean, it's a good concept, and I mean, we see it down on the other end of town. It's just a matter of making sure that the traffic's addressed.
That the traffic is addressed. That's my concern.
Yep. All right, so that was overwhelmingly in favor of doing some traffic study. So we appreciate that feedback. Again, you know, like Greg said, I mean, we got to come to you at some point and have these initial discussions. So, I'm kind of switching gears just on the fly here. Certainly the other comments that Jeff had given us, and I guess, adding a loading zone doesn't seem from our perspective to be too big of a concern. I guess, just to maybe go back to the overall parking count, and maybe not, Jeff, maybe not with respect to the local ordinance, but like I had mentioned, if you take the square footage of the use and you divide that out by the 29 proposed spaces, that comes in somewhere around, one space per about 160 square feet. So I don't know if you can provide a little bit of thought on that relative to kind of a, some other ordinance, because typically you would see in some other towns and communities that retail is, about one space per 200 square feet. So the last thing I want to, I guess, trend towards is trying to flood this site with parking, because I think that can be detrimental to a development plan as well.
If I could interrupt you for a second. Excuse me, folks. Are we just about getting ready to go to public comment? No? Okay. Thank you. Sorry. I'm sorry.
So I just, again, from our perspective, this provides, the parking that we believe works well. And I hear your comments relative to the other site that I've referenced in town. And I understand that at times, any facility like this can look maybe a little bit hectic. Certainly, vehicles with trailers are going to create some on-site queuing. To me, I look at that as a kind of a separate item than people that literally can't get a striped parking space and want to go into the store. So from a striped parking space perspective, it's our opinion that this layout does offer enough. Again, we're trying to balance green space and the needs of conservation buffers and provide snow storage and a lot of the things that we would look at in site plan layout. So just to that point, Jeff, and if you don't have any commentary, that's okay too. Just, looking at it without the kind of the, I guess, gray area of the overall square footage calculation for the parking area.
I'm going to have to get back to you on the square footage. I want to be able to look at the regulations, see if elsewhere in the protective bylaw or the zoning bylaw, if it speaks to a definition of how the square footage is supposed to be interpreted, whether it's just a parking space or the parking space in the access aisle. And I'm glad we got the sketch, because that helps me a lot more, because I can't remember the last time I've looked at something in Lunenburg with this requirement. If I have, it's only been one other project. I don't have a lot of experience in Lunenburg yet on that particular issue. Other sources of data, I'd be glad to take a quick look at some other town regulations to see how the interpretation of the square foot jives to parking spaces and compares to another community. I can tell you with respect to the parking generation rate, I took a quick look at that. And for land use, which is convenience market with gasoline pumps, they had 10 study sites, not a lot. On the 10 study sites on weekdays, they've got a peak weekday between 12 and 1 p.m. So that's middle of the day, the lunch crowd. Saturday, they have 7 sites worth of data, again, not a lot, peak between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. That, the late morning to me on a Saturday makes sense. Average, and it's based on square footage of the facility. The average peak parking demand for those 10 sites was 35 and some change, almost 36 spaces. Again, you got to use the data with caution because of the limited sample size. 85th percentile, 85% of the sites had a parking demand of this number or less, 44.6 spaces. that feels high to me. But still, you know, it's more data than I had from any other source. And that's, again, for the 4,250 square feet of convenience market with gas pumps. In addition to that, the use has a coffee donut shop with drive-through window. That is a separate parking use. I did not write down the peak hours, but the average demand for the 900-ish square feet of facility, that's about 9 parking spaces to support the drive-through and the coffee shop. Well, the coffee shop part of it, the drive-through, of course, is the drive-through lane. The 85th percentile, 17 vehicles. To me, that felt like a wide range. Again, limited data. I don't have the numbered data points for that one. So nevertheless, you know, parking's a valid concern. And I'm going to start by looking at what was provided to me tonight and comparing that back to the zoning bylaw, and I can give you a better talk on that. And, nearby facilities is certainly the other one on Leominster and Leominster Shirley Road, but there's also the one farther down Route 13 in Leominster, Cumberland Farms. That seems to be a pretty busy facility. If I remember right, they have 10 fueling positions and about 25 parking spaces, and the aerial photograph I looked at, don't know what time of the day it was taken, but all but only 2 or 3 parking spaces were used. But that's, again, Cumberland Farms.
It's tough to find a parking space there, I'll tell you that.
I stopped there for gas, but I never go into the store. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a couple final comments, because I think we know that we're probably going to request a continuance based on this, but that Cumberland Farms is actually quite a bit bigger convenience store, and although it's a very similar use, they definitely have a larger offering there for kind of the walk-in customer, I would say, and in that overall square footage that they have there. So, you know, keeping in mind that part of this is the drive-through. So, you know, some of that associated square footage in this building footprint is directly attributed to, you know, facilitating people that are drive-up customers. So there's kind of a bit of a give and take on that, although it's certainly creating, you know, more on-site circulation by having the drive-through. The overall square footage of the building, you know, like I said, part of that is specifically dedicated to facilitate the drive-up customers. So, I mean, I think at this point, we've gotten quite a bit of feedback, all of which is noted. I've been trying my best to keep up with Greg and Frank with their pace here, but I don't think that Wednesday of this week will give us enough time. Plus, it sounds like your agenda is getting kind of full, so, you know, I'm certainly up for any more feedback that anyone has tonight, and then we'll go from there.
We still have not heard from the public.
Yep.
Is there anyone here to speak to this project? For, against, on the fence, please?
I'm not really sure if I'm public,
Still Dan, right?
owner or whatever that is, but I did want to just say one quick thing in regards to the applicant. When I was first approached by Mr. Higgins, I met with him down at his office in Harvard, you know, sat in his conference room. He has the walls full of, you know, different facilities he built. I went and looked at 3 of them. He explained a lot to me in our first meeting, and when I left, he said, you know, just so you know, I told you more than I probably told a lot of people, meaning some of the things that he tries to do above and beyond, you know, sidewalks have to be 5 feet, he goes 6 feet, you know, parking spaces are supposed to be 19 feet, he goes 20, different things that he tries to do to make the facilities better. And when I drove around with my wife Jean and looked at some of those facilities, I was very impressed with them, just because of how he does things and how he tries to do things. And, you know, I'm hoping this project can be obviously a plus to what I'm trying to do on my pieces of land. And I just think that should be noted that it seems like he is that type of developer. Not to be argumentative, but one thing about, what you're talking about with different, coffee shops and Leominster Shirley Road and what have you, there's people on Prospect Street in Lunenburg that would probably argue with you that it might be better to have another coffee facility in the Whalum area, so that now people in the Whalum area aren't driving through Prospect Street to get to the coffee shop on Leominster Shirley Road. So there's two sides to that argument. I know a gentleman on Prospect Street that absolutely positively hates the fact that Keating's is down there, because my trucks go from my facility to Keating's all day long. And he's always like, I wish there was a gravel bank on the other side of town that you could go get your trap rock. So, traffic studies, I understand what they're all about, but again, my whole thing is, why not try to keep the business in our area, hopefully employ Lunenburg people, get businesses that support Lunenburg, everything, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, soccer, basketball, that type of thing, rather than driving down to a crowded Cumberland Farms that's in Leominster. So I would hope that would, mean something. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comment? Yes, please.
Phyllis Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. I have a question. Is there a possibility that they could add parking if they needed it? It would seem like parking is really a big concern, and when you're approving a project, does the planning board have a way to say, okay, we'll let you have this many parking spaces, but show us your plan if it turns out you need 10 more? Because, if they can't make any more and they don't have enough, that's not good for anybody. So is there a way to do that?
That would be a question for you.
I think, and Adam can correct me if I'm wrong, but parking is generated by the use. So the use go ahead, Adam, why don't you?
The zoning bylaw outlines a calculation for the prescribed number of parking spaces for a use. The planning board, I guess theoretically could require it, but that's not something that is, I would say, within their authority, and it would give an applicant an opportunity to appeal their decision if they felt it was something that wasn't applicable. So if, say, they wanted to put less than the prescribed parking spaces, and you see this more and more now with big box stores, communities have parking regulations and big box stores look at them and they're required to create, 800 parking spaces, and Lowe's or Walmart will come in and say, listen, we use 800 parking spaces for 4 months or for 4 weeks out of the year. So is this really what you want us to do, to put this giant sea of pavement that you're not gonna?
Right. No, I
and in
agree.
those instances, sometimes communities will negotiate and say, all right, well, we're gonna allow you to have 500 because you think that's what's reasonable, and we're gonna do this other thing that you can use as overflow parking and you have to maintain it in a certain way. In this instance, it appears, and I have to do a little bit more research in conjunction with Jeff, that what they're proposing meets the standard of the bylaw. So for the planning board to say, well, I know the bylaw says that, but we think you need more parking, is tenuous ground for the board to push for that.
Yeah, no, that's not really what I'm saying. I'm saying, is there, if it turned out they didn't have adequate parking, is there a place they could put a few more spots? Can you?
But you're saying adequate parking. I guess I don't understand what you mean. You mean functionally adequate or meeting the bylaw?
No, I mean,
because the two can be different.
They talked about, I don't frequent honey farms, but they've talked about, parking being difficult sometimes. And, if you had a clause that, listen, if the parking gets to be too difficult, you got to put 5 more spots in.
But that would need to be something that was reflected in the bylaw.
Yeah,
So there isn't a mechanism for doing that. So you're talking about functionally having enough parking as opposed to meeting the regulation.
That's what
So I think Ken's not here, so I'll bring up Asian Imperial.
I was going to say, there's an example.
This is a perfect example. When they constructed that restaurant, they met the bylaw requirements for parking spaces. I don't think that there's a single person in this town that would say they had enough parking at the time that they built it.
Well, and I want to stop you there, because I disagree. I've brought this up before, and I think it's something we need to look at, is I believe that if you look at the actual number of tables and actual number of seats that they have, I believe it exceeded the amount that was permitted. And so before we use them as an example, I want to make sure we have the facts
Well,
straight.
I think that at the time it was approved, and now I'm not saying that there wasn't some alterations that maybe inadvertently or purposefully, I'm not going to...
Right.
But when it was approved, they represented, this is the number of tables we had, this is the number of parking spaces that's required, so we meet that. So they have voluntarily created more parking because it makes their business function better, and the planning board encouraged them and worked with them to do that. In this case, if in a year this is approved and they've built it and they say, you know what, wow, we really need more parking, we want to come up with a scheme to do that, the board would certainly work with them, but we don't have a vehicle to require them that if they've met the regulation to, oh, you know, we've decided it's not working, you need to put more. There isn't any opportunity to do that.
It would be nice if the bylaw had that wiggle room, so that...
I think I think the only way to address that is to...
Imperial is certainly a great example of that.
I think the only way to really, to change that is to reevaluate the parking requirements regarding what the uses are for each, and that's something, that's another issue that the planning board at some point may want to revisit.
And it is something that the board does need to. I think that the way that we calculate parking is silly, archaic.
So I think it's something
and I
we gotta
think
look
that
at.
what we had talked about previously is, after the adoption of the new use table, we would have a better understanding of what uses we're looking at, and that would be a better time to address parking calculations, because some uses have changed category or name, and so doing that makes more sense with having a contemporary list of uses, and so that's certainly something that's in the file of we need to do this.
One more question. I'm a little bit familiar with Honey Farms. Now, is the traffic going to go this way and that's the window? Is that right? And are these parking spots like at Honey Farms? I almost got hit one day going from my car trying to get into the store because of the people flying out of the drive-through. I think that's a really poor design.
It's a pretty efficient use of the space.
It's a terrible, if you don't, I didn't even know there was a drive-through because I'm not a drive-through person, and I almost got hit. I go, what is a car doing flying out of there? So I think that doesn't work. Didn't work for me.
And I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. And if you are around nearing the end of the meeting tonight, then we'd love to have some more conversation. But to answer your question, when Adam first got here, hot mess. Verbatim. Hot mess is what he called these zoning bylaws.
Still a little bit of a hot mess.
Well, because we've only updated a small amount.
Right.
So we
have a lot of work to do.
We are very well aware. But working with what we've got at this moment. Is there any further public comment? Seeing none. Back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I will just briefly address the last comment. So this site, which almost aims to achieve addressing what you just brought up, and I'm not sure that other site has. This site has a dedicated stop bar with a striped crosswalk to facilitate people crossing from any of these spaces on the southern portion of the site, and they cross and they come up, a striped aisle at the end of the front parking bay. So it's a lot more controlled movement there. There's also a handrail at the far end of the building up on the sidewalk so that pedestrians that aren't, exactly right, they're just not currently at that moment aware that they're about to step out into a drive-through lane. Well, they can't do that here. They're going to come to a handrail. It's going to make them stop. It's going to divert them out, down, and give them a chance to view beyond the edge of the building, as well as, you know, the car now leaving the pickup windows, now getting an opportunity to see pedestrian traffic, and they also have to stop at that crosswalk as well. So hopefully this site plan is a bit more in line to accommodate that type of conflict.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify my comment about it's an efficient use of the space. Unfortunately, the efficiency equates to more maneuvers going on in the smaller square footage. Basically, I mean, at least you've only got one direction of traffic there, but in that one direction of traffic, you've got pedestrians crossing in both directions. You've got the potential for straight on coming out of the drive-through. You've got straight on not going through the drive-through. You've got the potential for somebody there backing into the space. You've got the potential for someone coming around the corner. So there's like 6 or 7 movements going on in like 50 to 100 square feet. It's tight, but that's what's being required with the efficient use of space these days. And they're not making any more land, unfortunately.
So I guess because we've had quite a bit of kind of back and forth on a few of the same hot topics at this point, I'll try and finish up my commentary, barring any other new questions. So I just quickly looked at my phone to do a calculation. I'm just going to redo it with the exact number, just for some perspective. So your bylaw would require essentially 8,400 square feet of paving area. So if you divide that by what we're proposing as a 9.5 foot wide by 19 foot space, you would end up with a site with 47 parking spaces, which is, I mean, to try and wrap your head around that, if you weren't using the mentality that we have, which is accounting for the necessary access aisle adjacent to all of these parking bays. I mean, there'd be almost 50 parking spaces on this site, that's a lot different site plan. We're not talking about, you know, an 1.5 acre piece of property. We're talking about a lot bigger project. And in my mind, that also just equates to a lot larger building that we're talking about too. So just to kind of put it in perspective. And then obviously as you add, you know, where do we squeeze in the more spaces? Well, if we put them in back, how do we get those pedestrians to where they're trying to get to? So you're furthering this you know, this site plan into a lot more than, like, I'll go back to my original statement, which was we honestly believe that this layout works for the needs of this applicant and the use that they provide. And I guess that's where I'm at. So the only last piece of information is just to clarify, and maybe Adam, what we can do is put together maybe a scope of work, a proposal for the traffic study, and maybe have Jeff take a look at that and make sure that the scope of the study makes sense. Because what I'm hearing is we should be looking at turning movements at the site driveways, but potentially also the intersection at Whalum Road. So,
and I don't know that the board is looking for turning movement, and please jump in if I'm incorrect, turning movement actions at Whalum Road, but the impacts of the turning movements at the site on the intersection at Whalum Road, most specifically in the northbound direction, because as someone slows down to turn left going north, Electric Ave is not a particularly wide road in some places, and depending on who's driving, depends on where they sort of stop within the lane, and that may hinder traffic northbound, thus impacting the intersection at Whalum Road. Specifically, these would be drive time hours. Not specifically, but that's going to be when your heavier volumes are. So looking at percentage of turning movements through that statistical analysis and what that potential queue might do to the intersection. So I think it's not necessarily the movements at Whalum Road, It's the impact of the movements at the site on
Yes.
Whalum Road.
Yep, I think that's what I was trying to get at as well, yep. What's the residual effect?
Yeah.
And we need to understand, at those varying peaks, whether it's, a midweek, so a weekday AM peak versus PM peak versus the weekends, which we know are different. You can certainly get your donuts at a different time of day that, on a weekend than you can on the weekday. So it sounds like I understand the scope of that, but I also need to convey that, back through my client to a traffic engineer. So I think it probably makes sense to just have.
Yeah, once
guys
you have
review the
something
scope.
drawn up with your client and a traffic engineer, you're welcome to send it along, and Jeff and I can look at it and give you any comments we might have.
Yep, so, as I had mentioned, we were certainly feeling as though we were on the fast track. So I think at this point, 2 meetings out, I guess, would probably be where we would use as a starting point, and I'm not sure
that you'll be ready. Okay.
Yes, so can we start there and request a continuance?
You certainly can.
Okay.
We're already going to be talking about putting that
Well,
one off.
the impact of that now affects the board, because, and this is something that I think that the board can sort of decide now, because it's on the agenda and it makes sense within this context. Matt had brought to my attention that our next regularly scheduled meeting is the same night as town caucus.
Which is what date?
March 11th. So potentially we would need to move it in 1 week forward to March 4th or 1 week back to March 18th. And that would allow for a second night of the marijuana public hearing for the bylaws and still have it in time for final text to be submitted to the warrant.
I think moving it forward, I also want to bring up, and I'm sorry to say this, but I know we need a supermajority.
Correct.
You'd mentioned this is on the agenda, but at the end of March, I will be out of commission. So I am having major surgery and will be out of commission for at least a couple weeks, potentially longer. So I'm concerned about the supermajority as well, so that's something we're going to have to talk about.
Okay.
And getting back to the direction, okay, if you want to figure this out.
Nope, it sounds like March 4th is where the board would lead for the next meeting.
I think the only thing that I would say about what you had said about the traffic analysis would be, it would be the directional demand in the southbound direction that would potentially interrupt the left turning from the northbound traffic.
Yeah, and I think that would be part of the turning count. And,
right, okay.
And how the two play together. Okay, so we have a motion for continuance.
But we need a date certain, right?
Oh, what? I think I heard 2 March 4ths.
Well, I guess that kind of gets into, we're available March 4th?
I'm available March 4th.
Rescheduling our regularly scheduled meeting.
Right, I do want to talk about our meeting schedule as well, because I will not be available on the 25th. So what is our normal schedule would be the
2nd and
11th
4th.
and the 25th,
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
So just FYI, I will not be available the 25th.
Right. We'll be talking about that later on.
Yeah. So I would make a motion that we reschedule our meeting. So are we rescheduling the 11th meeting or the
Yes,
18th?
the
So
11th.
we're rescheduling the 11th meeting to March 4th.
We can do that in the middle of a public hearing?
No, but you can
Continue.
you can continue to
Okay.
March 4th and then you can reschedule after.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I would make a motion to continue this public hearing to March 4th at 6:35 PM.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, if you want to reschedule the hearing, you're out of public hearing and you can do that.
Okay, we are done with our public hearings for the evening. Yeah, so apparently we're all available for March 4th.
I don't know about Ken.
Well, we'll figure that out.
Of the people who are here.
Right.
Well, as long as Ken's here on the 25th, that's the big.
But I won't be here the 25th.
No, of February.
Oh, okay, February.
Well, no, he'll need to be here for the 4th, or else they don't have a supermajority to vote for.
Right.
And the 25th.
But we have
'cause
time to
got 3
communicate
others.
with Ken, and if it turns out, they can just request a continuance, and you can hold the meeting, and they can just come back at a...
Yeah, we definitely got to figure out what we're doing about our meetings.
Planning, no, cancel. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're done with our public hearings, minutes approval. They've all been scanned to us?
Yes.
Oh, I lost my agenda.
Does everybody see them? I'm just waiting on you guys.
Tell them what meeting it is.
Yeah.
Isn't the
I
motion
just handed
usually...
it to you. No one motioned.
Isn't the motion usually just... All right, so for the public hearing meeting minutes of 190 Electric Ave, January 14th, 2019, I would accept the motion.
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. For the minutes of January 22nd, 2019,
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes of January 28th, 2019,
Motion to approve?
Second.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I need longer arms soon.
I need nothing. Losing my agenda. Committee reports, capital planning, no report. Stormwater task force, we don't believe we've met since our last planning meeting. I have not been in attendance at any meetings since, so there's no report. Agricultural Commission is meeting a week from this Thursday, so no report there. Open space is... Dave is not here. We need to, that's gonna be on the reorganization, right?
Well, we can, I wanted to talk about that, that's why it's down there.
Okay. What else did Dave have? Anything?
Green, I think.
No, I have green.
Oh, you have green. Yep,
Yeah, they
that's
were
it.
pretty much in order, so MJTC is you, right? Or is Ken?
That's Ken.
And Ken will not be able to attend MJTC this week, are you gonna be able to?
I am
Okay.
attending.
So,
Okay.
he may ask you to give the report next time.
Yep, no problem.
So no report on that. MRPC?
We met last Thursday, the 7th. The DLTA grants are due March, early March. Are we gonna put something together for?
Well, they use the statistical analysis that they use was the answer that I got. They're
Thank you,
not
Jeff.
going to do a new
Good night.
statistical analysis for population. Thank you, Jeff. The board had requested, if they had other population, projections that they would use. And they said, no, that's their population projection.
Well, that's really problematic, but okay.
What about master plan grants?
The EOEEA or one of those, they said they'll be releasing some, I think, coming up in mid-February to early March.
But didn't we use a DLTA grant for the economic development
We did.
component? So,
Well, we use DLTA, which isn't a grant, it's a technical assistance service, but
well,
the-
I understand, but
the
it
state
is,
pro-
but the state provides the funding.
Well, yeah, but the state provides grant funding. The Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs is going to be releasing grant funding specifically for master planning.
Okay.
Not doing a chapter like, we're going to give you cash
Okay,
to hire a consultant or work with one of our 6 or 8 pre-approved consultants, which is something the board had inquired that we look into previously.
okay. you know, DLTA grant funding is available, and I just, you know, would think that we'd have at least a couple projects we could potentially put into that.
We certainly could. They have to fit into the box of DLTA, which some of the master planning stuff would. But the sense that I got from the board last time was they were hesitant to use MRPC using the population projections that they have.
Could we do
That's
traffic
true.
studies?
That's true.
Can you what?
Can we do traffic studies, intersection analysis?
I don't know.
Turning movement?
Yes,
For DLTA?
I thought so.
I thought that they did a separate traffic counting.
Well, we are entitled, we
Four.
receive
Yes.
4 traffic studies
Per year.
Every
per
3 years.
year.
Is it per
No,
year? I
per
thought it was every
year.
3 years.
No.
Every 3 years, they cycle through the regular 4.
No.
And then they give us a
Oh,
couple
that's right,
extra-
yes. And
Right.
they,
Give us a
every
couple
3 years, we
extra.
get the
Right.
extras.
So if there are traffic intersections that we'd like to have looked at, we certainly should let them know.
Correct.
And additionally, you know, there are other components. For example, you know, walkability studies, complete street studies. I mean, there are all and many communities are using that, some through DLTA, some through Unified Planning Work Program. But, you know, other communities are taking advantages of programs that MRPC and studies that can be done. So I would think that there are studies that we could be doing in Lunenburg to look at, you know, walkability, intersections, complete streets. I mean, I would think that there's got to be a vast amount of things that we could at least tap into.
Well, I will send if I didn't, I will send out the DLTA work program, and we can, you know, work on it at on the 25th.
That would be
Just
great.
a project list, and I can, you know, I can put together the application.
That would be great.
Is that it on MRPC? Charter review?
We've got our next meeting coming up Wednesday. And then our public hearings the end of the month.
Super. And then green communities.
Haven't heard a word.
Okay, so now moving on to director's items, board reorganization.
So, we are down a member. We've notified the town manager. The vacancy has been posted at town hall. I believe the first ad ran on Friday of last week. So applicants can start applying. I believe it needs to be advertised for 10 days and no appointment can be made for 14. So in early March, should someone have applied, there's the potential for the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board jointly to make an appointment to fill that seat for the remaining 2.5 months. I don't know, I have not heard that anybody has applied, but that doesn't mean somebody hasn't or won't. That being said, the board can choose to reorganize now, wait for Ken at the next meeting, or wait until the 5th seat is filled and reorganize at that point. That's really a board decision. Previously, they waited for the 5th member in order to ensure everybody had the opportunity to have their say, but that was then, this is now, so I'll...
Yeah, no, I would defer to you two because Ken is already the clerk and our vice chair has stepped down. So if either one of you has a strong desire to be vice chair for a couple of months until the election, speak now. And other than that,
I don't. I think Ken can fulfill the duties until such time
necessary.
as we have a full board. I do want to talk about the open space liaison, though. And I do, in the event, I think open space is pretty much fulfilled their work right now. But I would say that in the event that there is, you know, a meeting, I'm very interested in that. You know, I've worked in land acquisition before with Brandon on the Lane parcel, and it's something that is, you know, very important to me, is the preservation of open space. So I'd be very interested in fulfilling that liaison position.
so they're ad hoc and they're not standing, right? So they don't really have a time certain to be done, but they're not a...
Correct, but if a 61 parcel were to come up, they would meet to run through the criteria. I don't think that the board voting to appoint Paula to that position would necessarily fall to reorganization. It's an empty position at this point. and the board is the appointing authority, so.
I don't have a problem waiting until Ken gets
I was gonna say,
here.
we can put it on for the next meeting. If
but
that's something
I am-
that you're interested in, we can have an agenda item that covers that.
Sure. No, I have zero problem with having anybody represent the planning board, but the question, I guess, was, is that something that the planning board can make? Probably not. Can propose to become a standing group?
It's your subcommittee.
I know it's our subcommittee, but
So-
we can't create.
You can't, but you could, you.
Petition to?
You could, and I guess what I would suggest is you may want to have a conversation with the current chair and
I would
maybe the
agree.
membership, and I think that they had some discussions about potentially approaching the selectmen about morphing that committee into a more standing committee that would look at shepherding the open space plan through implementation. And my understanding was that they're not looking to be we meet every 2 weeks or once a month, but maybe a quarterly or something where they're just sort of checking in and making sure the plan is being moved along and certain items are working forward. But that's something I can reach out to him about if that's something the board is interested in moving forward. And certainly I think planning board supporting it helps their position and creates that.
Yeah, I think having a joint meeting makes sense, and I know it is something that they talked about, and I think that, there is more work than just developing the plan. There's actually seeing the plan through and working to implement some of those things, and so I think it does make sense to make it a standing committee. So I think that's definitely a discussion worth having.
So are we good on the reorganization?
Yeah.
And what do we have to talk about the draft bylaw?
Nothing. I sent you the draft bylaw. I think there's a paper copy in your folder tonight.
I do have a question on where it's advertised.
It has been put on Facebook. It's been in the paper. There is a flyer at the senior center. There's a flyer at the library. There's a flyer at Ritter. There is a flyer out in front of Town Hall.
There's a
They all have-
leaf on the wall around the corner.
I was gonna say, they all have a giant marijuana leaf on them.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I did notice the marijuana leaf.
I'm hoping that the idea is that it's something that someone will, what is,
Attract
and stop.
attention, yeah.
So we'll put it on later this week out in front of the Ritter Building.
And can we put it on the scroll? Can we just say that there's a public hearing?
I'm sorry, it is on the scroll.
Okay,
The
it is.
same thing that,
Not that scroll, I meant the electronic sign.
I'll talk to the chief about that and see.
Because people see
Yeah.
that when they're driving back and forth.
It's also on the TV scroll.
Yeah, right, but a lot of people don't sit and watch the
No,
scroll on the
but-
TV. Right, well, the two electronic boards we have, the high school and the public safety building, I'd like to see it on both of those scrolls as well.
I haven't seen any public hearings advertised on the high school, so I don't know what they're.
They
Do
do.
they? Okay,
They
I
do.
said I haven't seen them. I didn't say they don't. I said I was gonna say I don't know what their regulations are.
How is that not a moving sign? It is, right.
So we need to vote to move the March 11th meeting, or did we do
I think
that?
we already have, haven't we?
Right, but, right.
We voted to continue to the 4th. I don't think you voted to move the meeting.
Okay.
Right, so I would make a motion that we move the March 11th meeting to March 4th.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for coming.
So notices and communications were all scanned to the board. The meeting schedule is what it is.
Well-
You won't be available on the 25th?
Well, I want to talk about the meeting
Okay.
schedule. So we rescheduled the March 11th, so we're going to meet on the 4th and the 25th. Is that the proposal right now?
Correct.
Okay. I will not be available on the 25th, so if we
Okay.
don't have a member, you will not have a supermajority.
When would you be available on the 18th?
Yes, I would be available on, oh, no, I won't.
Okay.
I'm gone from the 13th to the 18th. So no, I wouldn't. So I just want you to be aware that the 25th, I will be gone, and then I don't anticipate that I would be back before April 15th, but that will be depending on whether or not I have the
Okay, so
ability to
so
talk.
theoretically, you're talking about 2 meetings.
Potentially more.
Potentially more. Now, let me pose a scenario where Mr. Higgins comes back next meeting, or on March 4th, and says, I'm not ready. And we don't know if we have another member or not. And we say, okay, second meeting in April is the next time we know we can have a supermajority. And even if you can't talk, might you be available to vote on that hearing and then,
The problem is my jaw will be pinned shut,
okay,
so I don't know if I'll be able to. I honestly, until after March 5th, when I have my pre-op, I have
Okay.
no idea what the recovery is going to be.
and the reality is it's not a roll call. So you can signalize yes with like a paper or something.
It depends on whether or not I have, it depends on what,
And
I
again,
don't
I'm
know
not.
what my scenario, my
Sure.
physical
I'm not
well-being
trying to
is
get you
gonna
to
be.
commit to something, I just want to understand what,
The potential is there. I will be able to tell you more after March 5th. That's
okay.
the best
And
that I
I
can
guess
tell
that's
you.
the best we can ask for.
You know, but I will tell you that it's a significant
Yes,
process,
certainly
so.
sounds like it.
But I will also say, and I should probably say this for public comment, but I'm not going to, I do intend to run for election. So once I get through that healing process, I'll be back. I hope.
Good. Well, we've got 3 seats, so.
Soon.
Ongoing items, earth removal permitting, that's kind of taken a backseat to marijuana, but I think that will be something we work on over the summer with solar, taking it over from the Board of Selectmen. There is a draft bylaw that I have to neaten up a little bit before I give it to you folks, but it shouldn't be too much heavy lifting, at least not the bylaw portion. So that would be looking for a special town meeting in the fall, or if the charter passes, I guess it would be second annual town meeting.
I'm definitely interested in seeing it. I know, having done earth removal permits for a period of time, I do have specific things that I'd like to see.
Yeah, and the idea is this would be earth removal and earth fill, so it would sort of be addressing both, and it would be a two-tiered, it would be a bylaw and a set of regulations, and the regulations would be some of the more specific stuff, similar to the regulations we have for special permits and site plan approval, and it gives the board the ability to move that stuff around and change it as they find things aren't working for them, or they need more information, or they're asking for too much information. So that's something that, I think what my intent would be is to bring it to this board. The Board of Selectmen has sort of seen it and give me some comments, have this board sort of give some comments on that, and then kind of get both parties together and sort of hash out how that transition works.
Well, can you forward what the Board of Selectmen has seen, or?
Yeah, I want to make the comments, I want to make the alterations with the track changes, so you can see what it was and what they've sort
Okay, 'cause
of leaned
yeah, I
towards,
think-
because I think it's important that those two things be shown, because hopefully you'll understand what they wanted to change and maybe agree or disagree.
Okay. I will tell you specifically, I've got concerns about the plans and the topography. And,
Yes,
And so
yep.
that's my big issue.
And
is
that's all
existing topography
much more
versus end
clearly,
topography
yeah,
and-
that's all much more clearly spelled out, I think. Economic development, it's moving along. Master plan, we've got the money. We'll talk about, DLTA and the potential for EOEA grants.
I'd like to add something to the master plan discussion. I think that we should go, honestly, I don't know how it was funded before. Before Adam got here, the control of the planning department was very tight-fisted and very closed-mouthed. But I think that we should get a budget line with a sum of money that would not only facilitate either having done or outsourcing the master plan to be done as it should be by the planning board, as is designated, and, I've been here for I think 7 years, 8 years, I'm not quite sure. I've been here quite a while. And for most of those years, I've been pushing towards reprographic capability.
Towards what, I'm sorry?
Reprographic capability.
What is
Like
that?
Being able
a
to
wide-
reproduce
A
things.
wide format printer.
Okay, okay,
Plotter.
okay.
So
yeah.
if we've got applicants, they can come here with one set and we can reproduce it.
But that's a cost associated
It's
with that.
pass-along cost. I mean, engineering, like, in my office, we make a lot of money off our plotters. Our plotters pay for themselves in a very short period of time. And I'm sure you're not gonna have the capacity here, it's not gonna have the flow, but I have spoken to other people in other towns, in town management positions, and planning director positions, and in various other positions in town, DPWs, facilities, engineering. We don't have some of those, but, it is, an asset after a while.
So I think it's a discussion we should have. I definitely think we should have the discussion in our budget, during our budget discussion, and I guess that's leads to a question of when that occurs.
We generally have not had a budget discussion.
I would
because
like to have a budget
That could go on
discussion.
ongoing items.
Well, that would have to happen next year. The budget's been submitted and will be.
I don't care when it's gonna happen again. It doesn't mean we can't start talking about it.
Correct, you can
now.
start, but it wouldn't be effective of the budget for this year, I
That's
guess is
good.
my.
We need to start talking about it sooner or later. Sooner would be better.
Sure. And our budget is limited.
Okay, I would request that moving forward, we see the budget and we talk about it. And I would request that things like that, because of the point that Mr. Allison just raised, I think that there are things we should be talking about. And if our budget is that limited, are there components that we should be adding, that we should be incorporating? So I would like to have that discussion, because I'd like to understand what our budget is and where it goes, and potential improvements to that.
And specifically, I brought it up because we're asking for $50,000 on the capital plan. When we have a budget line. So I guess that's where it fit into master plan. Thank you.
Cluster development, I did speak with town council about that. I have not heard back from him about the alterations you requested he make. And then solar energy systems, I think as April rolls around, we can start to dig into what changes may need to be made to that.
Oh, I wish we could have pointed that out when the public comment came out,
What?
that it's on our ongoing items.
And we should add parking to that. Ongoing items.
With the cluster development, can we, I don't know, follow up with?
Yeah, I'll follow up with him.
Costing,
Yeah.
so we
I mean, it was,
hopefully get it on.
I'll see him on the 25th.
Okay.
And
What's the deadline for the submission of articles?
the 19th or 21st?
Of,
March.
so we're not going to get it on for this year?
But you could.
19th.
Yeah, you could, I mean, because you can submit it and then have the public hearing after it's submitted.
Okay, yeah, so,
Because you don't have to have the public hearing before it's submitted to the warrant, you just have to have the article into,
well, that definitely should be our top priority then, I think.
Well, and can we put it on for a public hearing?
not without,
Actively?
not without
Yeah.
language. Because when you advertise, you have to have something for people to come and look at for the public hearing.
I think we're already looking at 6 to 8 hour public town meeting. So
But I think that's a pretty simple,
I do too.
straightforward change.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily
Have you
disagree.
been to town meeting? You just cursed us.
That particular line item, I mean, it's probably 3 sentences.
Right, so I think, let's at least put it on our next agenda and talk about it.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. But also, I mean, just given the fact that we've got, potentially two meetings for public hearings on the draft, on the marijuana bylaw,
Yes.
there could be considerable revisions. brought
February
forth from that.
25th is the hearing on marijuana. isn't
Correct.
it?
The first.
You know what, I'm gonna try to be here, I'll just have to.
You said you'd be here on February 25th.
Oh,
You said
February 25th.
March
I'm
25th you
thinking
wouldn't
March
be here.
25th. February 25th, I will be here.
Yeah,
You could try and be here on March 25th, that would be great.
I will, I don't know.
I'm just,
so that will potentially spill over onto March 4th.
yeah, the board has already said they plan to do it over 2 nights. So everyone I've talked to, I've said, don't worry, if you don't make it on the 25th, they'll have it a second night.
Okay. Super.
That's all
All
I've got.
right. Any public comment from the chairs? Okay. Board comment or concerns? Either one of you guys?
I don't have any concerns. I just want to thank Dave for his service as a member of the planning board, and I personally am sorry to see him go. I think he was, although we had some spirited discussions, I really appreciated having different perspectives. I think that's what makes a board work. And I think that he will be greatly missed.
Yes. Yes, I second that. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
No.
There's a vacancy on BOS.
And I would also, another public comment is I would encourage people who are interested in serving on the planning board to submit a talent bank.
I don't think planning board's elected. I don't think it's on.
Well, it would be a talent bank for the interim.
They can submit a letter of intent or a letter of interest to the selectmen.
Right, during the interim period, a talent bank form or a resume or a letter of interest, and to serve out until May. And we will need another member.
Oh, it would be great to get your feet wet in public service.
Exactly, exactly.
So I will follow on with that with a comment. The resignation letter, I don't know who got it, who didn't.
I didn't get it, and I would like to see it.
There's some conversation that we should have about some conversations that have been had that some people feel that could have been followed through better. I really don't want to point any fingers, and I don't want to call anybody out, but there needs to be some discussion and understanding among everybody about the roles between paid staff, employees, elected people, appointments, the general functions of town government.
Well, specifically to the planning board, I think.
Specifically to the planning board, yes. But as the planning board, and since I've been here so long, comparatively, we've interacted with at least 3 other groups in a somewhat regular, almost annual fashion. And I think that the outcome has been less than less than pleasurable for most involved. I'm not taking blame for myself for any ruffling of feathers or whatnot, but we need to work better together, I think, all the boards and people who are within the boards, and just open lines of communication and follow through. And
so, having not seen the letter, I'm kind of at a disadvantage, so I would request that I see a copy of the letter. And I definitely think anything we can do to better improve communication will help everyone. But without having seen the letter and knowing specifically what you're talking about, I'm at a disadvantage. So maybe this needs to be an agenda item next meeting that we can talk about, or I guess I don't really understand what it is that we're talking about, so.
Sure.
Well, I think, not to say that it shouldn't be on an agenda, I think our next meeting is at least
going to be quite full.
Filling up.
Okay.
I don't know what the public hearing for the bylaw will look like.
Yeah.
I think it's evident that there'll be a fair amount of discussion about Borrego in one form or another. So it's up to you, but we have 3 public hearings that night.
Okay, well, at a future, one of the things I'd like to talk about is the potential for establishing a workshop schedule or potentially entertaining an idea of another meeting, because it seems to me that our meetings go really late and we don't get through everything. So at some point, if I am elected, it's something I'd like to talk about. But, I definitely think it bears talking about, but I need to have more information about what it is we're talking about.
Right.
So.
Well, to follow on that, since for many years, I've been a proponent of more meetings, longer meetings, whatnot. But as I told you after the last meeting, if we make it to 10:30, we have to take a vote to see if we continue. That was instituted within the last couple of years.
I will tell you that I think that sitting in a chair for 4 hours, definitely you're not as sharp. So personally, I would prefer to see more meetings rather than longer meetings. Obviously, there are times where you can't avoid having a long meeting, but I think that by the time, 10 o'clock rolls around, all of us are just looking at the clock thinking, okay, I want to get out of here. And I don't think that is what we're here to do. So, I think personally from experience, I think once you go over the 2.5 hour mark, you're not as productive. So I would tend to agree with the idea of having a timeline, but I think we have more business than 2 meetings a month from what I've seen in the short time I've been here, specifically relative to bylaws. So that's one of the things that, I know from the Board of Selectmen's standpoint, what we started to institute is a periodic workshop. And I think the bylaws are something that potentially we could be discussing during a workshop environment. And I think it's something, we have a lot of work to do on the bylaws, and as you referred to earlier, it's a hot mess. So I think that if we could schedule a meeting a month to focus on bylaws, that would make sense to me. So.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Noon every third Tuesday?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I work. That won't work.
For 5 minutes. All right. So that will get to you, and we can talk about it at a future meeting. Any further comments, concerns? I would accept a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Her.
That was aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.